agreements, and it's reminiscent very much of the housing bubble collapse. So some of what we talked about, in addition to the measures you see before us today, is just a quick but hopefully thorough look into exactly what lending practices and standards banks were hoping to meet when making these loans, and when and if people's interest in creating a new life for themselves was used unfairly by banks to propel them into a bad loan. These loans are for the cost of a house. You know, at the tail end of the medallion bubble collapse, these are substantial loans. And to be a loan agent and know that it's not going to get repaid, that is a serious problem. And the fact that it could continue to happen so soon after 2008 is probably even a bigger warning sign that our finance industry and that banks with predatory practices in particular haven't been snuffed out by that experience. So I hope that we can continue to talk about that as we also talk about all these other potentially more immediate and more tractable issues.
Councilor McGovern.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone who spoke tonight on this issue. And I was, I think, many conversations with folks about this. Just actually last night while dropping off one of my son's friends in front of the Courtyard Hotel in Cambridge, I stopped and talked to a couple cab drivers there, and you know, hearing the stories about people losing their homes and worrying about feeding their kids. I mean, it's impossible not to be impacted by that and to be moved by that. You know, I agree with my colleagues that you know, this is a two-front, at least a two-front sort of battle and our conversation. And one is leveling the playing field, as people say, and regulating Uber, which I think, you know, issues around being properly insured and proper query checks, that's easy. I mean, I can't imagine anybody disagrees with that. And if Uber disagrees with that, and if Uber puts up a fight against that, then that's unfortunate, because they should be trying to make sure that their passengers are safe as well. And they should be welcoming that. But the other conversation is about how do we change the view of the taxi industry, or how does the taxi industry change the view of the taxi industry? Because at the end of the day, you can add regulations, we can make Uber, the rules can change, and query checks can be done, and insurance can be different, and all those things. But that's not why people choose Uber over driving taxis. It's not because of insurance or lack of insurance or queries or lack of queries. It's because it's more convenient. And because people have had negative experiences in cabs, even though the vast majority of cab rides are great, it only takes some for it to tarnish the whole industry. And so, you know, we have to also make sure that we're helping the taxi industry along to make sure that they're offering a better product as well, because that's ultimately going to be why people take taxis as opposed to Uber, not because of the regulations. So it's really a couple things that we have to do. You know, a couple of people mentioned it tonight, and I'm curious about, you know, the other impact that Uber has on the city, where I've heard estimates between 1,000 to upwards of 3,000 Uber drivers a day coming into Cambridge. You know, I do wonder what that does to the environment. I do wonder what that does to traffic in the city. You know, maybe it's negligible, maybe it's not a lot. I don't really know, but it certainly seems like it could be a lot. And it certainly seems like having an additional 3,000 cars on the road constantly. They're not just driving one place and parking and going home. They're, you know, 24 hours a day driving on the streets. You know, that has to have an impact on the community, and that's something that we need to think about as well. You know, and then the other thing is, and this is what the gentleman last night was saying to me, was, you know, he bought the medallion with an understanding of what the deal was and what the regulations were with the city, and what he was agreeing to by buying the medallion. And those rules have changed. And that industry has changed because of these new services. And so he's feeling like, gee, I invested all this money under one set of circumstances, and now that's all changed and no one's helping me. It's sort of like a breach of contract, he feels. Now, I don't know if the city is responsible for that or not. We're not responsible for, if new businesses pop up, that's competition, and that's fine. But I do wonder if there are some ways that we can, if some of these people are going under, I wonder if we buy back some medallions from people. I wonder if we, do something that can help, people get out from under this bankruptcy that they're facing. I don't know. So, and I also just want to make it clear, because I'm sure folks from Uber are watching this. There's probably folks in the audience and watching this. And, it's like you raise a question about, gee, I'm wondering if this is fair. And then all of a sudden there's a campaign of Cambridge is trying to shut down Uber, flood everybody's email. Let's just have a reasonable conversation about this, because these are people's lives that we're having here. And I don't like being bullied, and I don't like being misrepresented, and no one's talking about shutting down Uber in the city. We're talking about getting a fair even playing field, making sure that that the competition is fair, that the rules are safe for passengers. And, I haven't been terribly impressed with the way in which some of the folks from Uber have handled this by, trying to sort of make this out to be something that it's not. So I really hope that we can move forward with some really honest and rational conversation and do what Mr. Harding from the school committee said, and really work together to come up with something that works for everybody, because that's ultimately what we want. And so it's going to take both sides to take a deep breath and have some level heads about this, and I certainly hope we can do that. Thank you.
Councilor Carlone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comments will be brief. I use taxis and I use Uber. It depends on the circumstance. Historically, whenever a new transportation system came in, car versus railroad, one industry goes down, the other industry goes up. But this is different. This is the same industry, cars, automobiles, but with new technology and the latest technology. But the disadvantage was a reinterpretation of the law, at least trying to use that to its advantage. And the other issue, as you all know, is the tendency is most cities, most towns don't take on issues which they initially believe that's a state issue. And we're falling into that area of thinking. But it does seem to me, and other councilors have mentioned this, that we're involved because you provide a public service. Not all businesses do, even though they probably all say they do, but you provide a direct public service, and you had to pay to participate in that service. And who did you pay? You paid the city through your medallion. Maybe some of it goes to the state. I honestly don't know. But it just seems to me that we have to react pretty quickly now. And if not, I agree with previous conversations. There probably should be a rebate. We're helping perpetuate this imbalance. And again, I think you're going to find everybody on the council believes it has to be the same across the board. And there might be some particulars we don't know enough about yet, but we have to move pretty quickly on this. So I think there will be large consensus on this if that's anything that you can go home with. But in fact, you made a contract with the city, and that's the part that keeps haunting me, that forces us to move quickly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
On the motion by Councilor Simmons, the three items are before us and we can take them all together. On the motion, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no, and those three items are all approved by the council. At this time, we're going to turn back to the city manager's agenda.
Mr. Chair, I think I had assumed at least that we had approved a motion to bring these before us, but I think we wanted to do some more discussion before actually adopting the orders. Is that all
Of
right?
course, left the station.
That was the vote that approved the orders.
I see. There may have been some confusion about that between the vice mayor and myself.
Just to adopt all three.
Okay.
What you can,
Hey, can I have a 2-minute recess, please?
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Did-
Okay. No, it's fine. I just.
मेयर से पूछ लो
I know. I'm gonna stick for that.
Very good. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. I was telling people that the legislature, we don't like. What it does is creates you know the word taxing chip by chip. Right. Other than taxing me. Not the I thought the research is the one. I work for. What's going on? No fighting. I had to pay for Uber. Really? Yeah, no. Yeah. No, it's
The time for the recess having expired, the meeting will come to order. We're going to turn now to the city manager's agenda. And Councilor Chung moves the adoption of the city manager's agenda 1 through 24. The pleasure of the council, Councilor Calhoun.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull number 24,
24.
please.
Councilor McGovern.
What can you say? 18?
14.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Toomey.
it's number 5, and was 22 pulled?
No.
Is that the responsible manager on the airplane? Yes, yeah, 22, please. Yep.
Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor.
Vice Mayor Benson.
Number 18.
18. On the balance,
Mr. Mayor, one more.
Vice Mayor Benson.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I lost my place here. Collision number 15.
It's like Jeopardy. You get a few seconds and the buzz is going.
Number 15.
15?
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, can I pull number 17, please?
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, on the balance of
Mr.
the,
Mayor, just, sorry, but which one, I lost my place as well. Which one was it that Ellen about the books?
which one what?
I was talking with Ellen Semenoff a little bit ago about the one for the books, and then. Oh, I did. That's okay, I'm sure I'll get it later.
Is it number 1?
Okay, on the, Councilor Chung, are you done? Okay, on, move the adoption on the ballot.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry. In the confusion, I forgot to mention 19.
On the consent agenda items,
Yes.
Council Calhoun,
Yes?
Council Chung, Council Kelly, Counsel Mazin.
Yes.
Counsel McGovern. Counsel Simmons. Counsel Toomey. Mayor Ma.
Yes.
And the items are adopted on the affirmative vote with 9 in favor.
Item to be pulled is number 5, transmitting and communication from city manager relative to the appropriation of a temporary emergency shelter grant received from the Department of Housing and Community Development in the amount of $287,449.07 to the Grant Fund Human Service Other Ordinary Maintenance account. It will be subcontracted to the Cambridge YWCA and used to shelter from July 1st, 2015 through February 28th, 2016, including the provision of case management for 10 homeless families at a time as referred by the Department of Human Services. I'm sorry, DHCD. And that was pulled by Councilor Toomey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a very brief question. This is a very important appropriation grant that we received. But I noticed that it runs from July 1st, 2015 to February 28th, 2016. And I just want to know, will there be the rest of that fiscal year to continue this program? That's my question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in all likelihood, the answer is yes. This, for the last 3 years, the money that we've received from DHCD has come 3 month or 6 months, sometimes 1 month continuation to assume that there won't be a contract after the end of February. It's been a number of years since we've gotten a full year contract at the same time.
And so you and your staff will be informing us if you need assistance with that. No other questions, roll call.
The item, Madam Clerk.
Vice Mayor Benson.
Yes.
Counsel Chung. Counsel Kelly. Counsel Mazin.
Yes.
Counsel McGovern.
Yes.
Counsel Toomey. Mayor Ma. And agenda item number 5 is adopted on the affirmative vote with 9 in favor.
Okay. Transmitting and communication from Richard C. Rossi, City Manager. Report item 1553 regarding a report on plans to address homelessness in the community, pulled by Councilor McGovern.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to give, as Ms. Seminoff knows, this is an issue that's very important to me, and I went to a few of the meetings, the planning meetings about this, and something that the Human Services and Veterans Committee has been talking about as well. So I wanted to just give you the opportunity to publicly talk about this process, what we're hoping to achieve, and then just let people know sort of how we're going to be addressing this moving forward. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as you know, there was a meeting in January of this year of the City Council's Committee on Housing, on Human Services and Veterans, and we spoke extensively then about all the work that had happened over the last 10 years in addressing homelessness and in the need for further planning for what steps the city, the region, the state government might take in moving forward. As a result of some money that we were able to receive from the federal government, we are engaging in that planning process. We've hired the leading group in the country who helps lead planning processes, the Corporation for Supportive Housing. They've done this around the country, and they've been working with the steering committee. You can see the list of individuals representing a number of significant community entities and individuals who've been working around homelessness. We've been engaged in a planning process that's going to lead to a charrette process, which is familiar to many of you more from the design world, and that's now been incorporated in a lot of human services planning. It's a way to have a relatively streamlined process and to bring a large set of the community together to address and try to come up with some important recommendations for moving forward. I think at the same time, as you know, we're moving forward with a citywide planning process. The homeless planning process will fold into that process ultimately. There were 2 community meetings that were held in June to help define the issues. The dates have now been set in September, and there will be a pretty wide process to publicize this starting a week from now. We've actually secured at the Sheridan Commander is going to, because it's accessible for transportation around the city, is going to be hosting essentially 2 all-day meetings on Tuesday, September 16th, and Wednesday, September 17th. And then, and there will be a series of fishbowl processes with local and national experts and members of the community, as many as want to come participate. Ultimately, there'll be a report back to the community on that Friday morning, and then the corporation, working with our staff, will come back with recommendations later in the fall that we can present back to the city council, recommendations for things that the city can do. You'll see from the material that we provided to you that the 6 areas that have been identified, which are pretty broad, they're in the middle of the second page. System level coordination, serving frequent users of emergency services, the housing first service model, services and policies to prevent homelessness, increasing the housing supply for persons experiencing homelessness, and strategies for increasing overall investment in services and housing.
Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Seminoff. So, just a couple thoughts. One of the things that came out of the meeting at the Central Square Library, one of the handouts, which I thought was really great, and one that we should, I think, publicize, is the different, oh gosh, now I'm forgetting what they referred to it as, but the spectrum of homelessness and what we're talking about, because I think, people sort of automatically go to thinking about, the folks we see on the street in Central Square. And there's really a really wide range of families, of young people, old people, veterans, people with mental illness, people without mental illness, that are at different stages of being threatened with homelessness. And so I thought that was just a really informative piece of information to help sort of, shape who it is that we're talking about, because it really impacts far more people than what I think we generally think. I also hope that, I took part in the census count when we went out and in February, I guess it was, because it got delayed. And, I hope that when we do these charrettes and when we do these, you have great people here as part of this group, but we also need to really be making sure we're talking to people who are struggling with homelessness, right? And, they may or may not be seeing an announcement on our city webpage that there's a meeting. So, I want to make sure that we're out, whether it's putting people on the street, sort of walking the streets and interviewing people, or whether it's going to shelter specifically, but, let's just make sure we're getting the real voices of the people who are struggling with this firsthand. And it looks like you want to comment on that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would just say that you could be sure, and I appreciate your comment, that from the people who are on the steering committee, many of them are folks who work directly with individuals and families who are homeless, that the intention is absolutely to ensure that we are doing outreach in a manner that will reach not just people who will read it from our social media or on the web, but folks who need to be encouraged to join us.
And just hearing, the people who work with folks who run the shelters, who work with, they're obviously gonna bring a perspective, and some of those, but actually talking to the individuals themselves, because, there are things that they may say to you, that they won't say to somebody else. And it's just really important to hear those voices directly, I think. And then, I think, I've said this before too, I want to make sure that when we go forward with this plan that we are, we're thinking about short and long-term goals. Right, and this goes back to sort of, I've mentioned this before when I was talking with folks in the meals program last December, and I'm talking about transitional housing and drug treatment and job training and substance abuse treatment and all these sort of larger complicated issues. The woman turned to me and said, "It's December, I just need some blankets," right? And so, we talk about all these big things that we need to do, which are important, and we need to talk about those things, but, we can't lose sight of the fact that there are people cold and hungry and without shelter on every given night, and that we need to make sure we're not just out here with it, right? But what are we doing today to make sure that we're helping people? And then lastly, I would just say that in terms of housing, right now we do have some, you see some folks who go from being homeless to getting housing, and sometimes that housing is in there's no other support services there, right? And it's really difficult, to go from being on the street to living in one of these new developments, where you have a concierge essentially at the front door and not having any other support services around you. So, we really need to make sure that the kind of housing we're talking about is also really appropriate in terms of providing support services for people to help them maintain that level of independence and maintain whether it's their sobriety or just being at their work or just being in a home. So that's something else I want us to consider. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Councilor, Vice Mayor Benson and then Councilor Carlone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to City Manager and Assistant City Manager Ellen Seminoff. Wanted to just thank you for putting this very, very quickly. I was able to attend this hearing, and I also want to take a moment to thank my colleague, Councilman McGovern, for his leadership on the issue of homelessness. As I read through this report, I noticed that there wasn't any mention of the opiate crisis in the state of Massachusetts and in our city. As you know, just this week alone in the Boston Globe, this issue has been dominating the headlines, and it's really the #1 public health issue in the state of Massachusetts. Last year alone, we had over 1,200 opiate drug abuse related deaths. And I've noticed walking through the square on a daily basis that there are more and more people hanging out in the square that are struggling with this, with drugs. And the issue of homelessness is obviously in many cases tied to the issues of drug abuse. And so I want to make sure that when you have this charrette, that we talk a lot about this issue, and that we talk about the need to increase the capacity for us to deal with this population, which is not just providing food and a blanket, but it's also treatment. And there is a policy order that this before us tonight, and it's asking us to look at this issue and to have a round table on this issue. But as we continue with this process, I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of the fact that this is a huge, huge crisis. I mean, just this afternoon, I was walking through Center Square, and a young woman approached me and said, "I'm hungry, I'm homeless, can you give me, some money?" And I couldn't. You could tell that she was struggling with drug abuse, but she was just so young. And the other observation I made when I read this report was that the Salvation Army is not even mentioned here as being part of the steering committee. And I'm not sure if that's because they weren't involved, but I know that the Salvation Army is certainly, in the trenches, on the ground, trying to deal with this epidemic. And, they both deal with, individuals that are homeless. They deal with individuals that are through the drug courts, are living at the Salvation Army, part of the treatment program. So, I think that we've got to have a comprehensive conversation about homelessness, and it has to include a conversation about our drug courts and how we as a council can continue to support the expansion of our drug courts and how we can work with nonprofits and other providers like the Salvation Army to help them continue to increase the capacity to deal with this population that that is really growing very, very quickly, and it does not discriminate. As you know, it's young, it's old, it's people from every part of our community, and it's huge. It's huge. So I want to thank you for that, and you just keep that in mind as the work goes forward.
Councilor Carlo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the manager and his team. Number one, I want to say this was an excellent memo. It was clear, it was to the point. One could understand it all and read it very quickly. And I think it adds credence to what you're trying to do by presenting it the way you did. Number two, as you've said in the past, housing is the first step. Getting housing, and obviously we have to integrate that into the new affordable housing as rapidly as we can. And number three, building on what was said earlier, there is a resident in my church. He lives in the entry at night, and he worked 25 years at the Boston Globe. He's healthy. He just can't find work. And even this weekend, the minister announced that this fellow wants to work for anybody in the church who knows. So there are people out there, as you know best, that they don't have any choice. It's not their desire, no one's desire, but some people feel comfortable outside. So it's a huge issue, and I just think this is fabulous. I'll be there on the 18th. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm placing the matter on file. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no, and the item is placed on file. The next item to be pulled is number 15, transmitting a communication from Richard C. Rossi, City Manager, relative to a waiting report, item 1547, regarding a report on the language for either a home rule petition or a change to general state law that requires all individuals involved in a collision to give written contact information. This was pulled by Vice Mayor Benson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the city manager and his team. I pulled this for one main reason, and I believe that the original sponsor of this policy order was Councilor Mazen. So this statute applies to anyone operating a motor vehicle, gets into an accident, and decides that they want to leave the scene of that accident, whether that person causes injury or property damage. However, it doesn't seem to address an issue that has been raised to me, particularly by a lot of the seniors in the city, and that is, let's say you have a cyclist that's traveling down the street or on a sidewalk, and that cyclist strikes or hits and injures a pedestrian and takes off. That person is really left with no remedy and no way of identifying who that cyclist really is. And, I've spent a little time thinking about this, and I'm going to have the opportunity to actually travel to the Netherlands to look at how they register, anyone that operates a bicycle there. But, I definitely do see a need in the city for us to think about some type of registration system or a plaque system that can go on the back of a bicycle. But, what protections does the victim of that kind of an accident have at this point?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Council, you are correct. That is a most difficult situation. In those instances, when we respond, we're definitely attempting to stop the bicyclist and gather that information for the victim. But you are correct. That is a very difficult situation.
And currently, maybe our city solicitor can help us with this, but I don't think there is the statute that specifically applies to cyclists. And I think as we, move in direction of creating more bike lanes and really, moving to a city that is much more bike friendly, we're probably going to see an increase in accidents, not so much between cars and bikes, but also between cyclists and pedestrians. And so I'm just curious if there's been any conversation about that particular issue.
Well, Mr. Vice Mayor, you're right. In terms of the laws that are currently on the book, Chapter 90, Section 24 is the statute that deals with leaving the scene of personal injury. And in that case, you're dealing with a motor vehicle that on a public way, and the person is required whenever there is any type of accident like that would either involve the pedestrian or the bicyclist. If they were struck by a motor vehicle, they're affirmatively required to stop and not just sit there passively on scene. The motor vehicle law does require them to affirmatively offer up the information to the person they struck. But again, that statute 9024 does cover basically motor vehicles, not bicyclists operating at that time. So that's a separate offense than someone who would be striking a pedestrian or another bicyclist with their bike.
And I believe in the case of a motor vehicle that strikes a person and leaves the scene, in that case it's a felony. But if it's just in the case of just causing property damage, it's actually a misdemeanor, I believe. But I guess what is it that what can we do? And this is probably something that the state legislature is going to have to take up. But what can we do to bring attention to the issue of accidents that occur between cyclists and pedestrians, and how can we keep track of that? But also, maybe begin to think about a system of registering, our cyclists. I mean, I don't know if any thought has been given to that.
I think a couple different things. As the superintendent had mentioned before, in those instances where there has been a bicyclist that has struck a pedestrian on the road, our officers are responding to the scene, and they would be treating that incident much like they would treat it if a motor vehicle struck a pedestrian. Whenever there's that type of injury that's involved, they're going to go to the scene, and just as they would with a motor vehicle, they're going to help facilitate the exchange of information between the driver and the pedestrian, or the driver and the bicyclist. And not only are they going to facilitate that information, they're also going to document it internally. So even if the parties who are on scene at that point don't necessarily write it down, it would be documented through the department. I think you raise an interesting point as well in terms of whether it's more of a local or a state issue. Obviously, probably more predominant with motor vehicles, but also bicyclists. There's a lot of people who are riding their bikes into the city, maybe commuting into work. And I think probably, as you were pointing out, you probably want to have a more uniform approach to how you're handling those instances. You wouldn't necessarily want to be in Boston where there wasn't regulation or an ordinance requiring someone to do something, and come into Cambridge and maybe people aren't aware of a similar regulation or ordinance in that effect. So I think much like 9024 dictates what motorists have to do when they strike an individual and either cause personal injury or property damage. Similarly, I think you would want to see more of that statewide type of law come into play when you're dealing with a bicyclist versus a pedestrian type of situation.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor? I have Councilor Carlin and Councilor Kelly.
Thank you. Just two quick thoughts and comments, and I realize these are fraught with problems of how to implement it, but many people have had bikes stolen. Growing up, I had one stolen when I was a teenager, and adults, it happens. It just strikes me that if there is a serial number boldly on one of the bars, that if the license plate incorporated that number, and if you sold a bike, that goes with it, then the identification is there and there would be less stolen properties. Now, granted, you'd have to stop the person to make sure the numbers correlate. Number two, certain roads are state roads, but Cambridge governs its roads. And it seems to me that one could say, if you're going to ride through Cambridge on a regular basis, even if you're from Arlington, you need to register your bike. I know it's fraught with complications, but again, it just seems that we want to identify. We've all seen bicycles go through red lights, just like we've all seen cars go through red lights. But the thing about cars is you can note it. Bicycles, unless you recognize an old friend, you can't. And these are just thoughts. It seems to me that if they're on the road, I don't know why they're not registered. Thank you.
Council Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I was the one that put this order in, and my thought was actually based on experience my wife had when she got cut off at the Hess station, now the Motorsport or something. I forget the name of it, but anyhow, a driver turned in front of her. She went to the ground. The driver did offer her identification, but my wife was so worked up with adrenaline and didn't realize how badly hurt she was. She just yelled at the lady to leave her alone, and the lady did. And my wife went on, and about an hour later, she started feeling really, really sore, and turned out she was pretty banged up. But by that point, it was impossible to get the driver's contact information. Having read your report, it doesn't seem like there's really any way around that. The woman offered her contact information, Hope, just buzzing with adrenaline after the accident, said no, and I guess we can't fix that. As far as registering bicycles, I think it's beyond fraught with problems. Are you registering the bicycle? Some of us have more than one. Are you registering the driver? Some, or the rider, I guess they're not really driving. Some of them are going to be 5 years old. I don't see how that's going to work. But when we have discussions about cyclists and pedestrians, I think we always have to add the discussion of jaywalkers. The tendency is to think that cyclists are always doing the wrong thing. Anyone who bikes through Central Square is going at all hours of the day to have to dodge countless jaywalkers. And it's not just Central Square, it's all over Cambridge. So it's a systems approach to transit. And when we talk about bikes and when we talk about cars, we have to talk about pedestrians, and increasingly we have to talk about scooters, we have to talk about wheelchairs, motorized medical conveyance devices, things like that. It's a hugely complicated problem, and if we just talk about registered bicycles, I don't think we'll get very far. So I did appreciate the attempt to find a solution to what happened to my wife, and it's just an imperfect world. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Kelly. Thank you. On the order to place on file, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no, and the ayes have it. The next order to report is number 17. Council Mazin, transmitting communication from Richard C. Rossi, City Manager, relative to awaiting report item number 15-57 regarding a report on distributing materials to retail stores on the dangers of using pesticides and urging them to cease stocking the pesticides.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to assembled team, thank you for this report back, which I think is like really comprehensive in terms of its outreach to local businesses, identifying which businesses use neonicotide pesticides, and begin to take this issue seriously as a city. I guess my only question is, what can we do to straight out ban it or add fiscal penalties of some kind? Is that within our power?
Through you, Mr. Vice Mayor, to Councilor Mazin, it's a good question. Again, for us as a department, through our environmental health unit, we are taking this seriously. Like anything else, there's a process. So we've looked at the literature. We are aware that there are some cities that have already enacted a limited ban. But in terms of just outright banning it, we did want to at least take the necessary step in working with the retailers, especially working with the other departments that would have a role in the enforcement.
For sure. And for that, I certainly have no qualms with that work. I would just love to see that as that work is happening, we have a timeline at the other end of it where we say, and by the way, in 2 years or in 18 months or in 2 weeks, you can't be selling things that poison our ecosystem and destroy our kind of pollination cycle.
So, again, thank you for the comment. I would just say that in similar processes, we've enacted outright bans in certain phases. So, for example, the ban on the use of artificial trans fats. We had some time, front-loaded the information, worked with the food service establishments, we educated consumers. So it did take some time, and we did draw a hard line in the sand. And to this date, we are still 100% compliant with our food service establishments.
Good. Okay, so I suppose it is upon me to advance the legislation, but then in the language, we'll make sure that it's in keeping with the schedule and the plans that you have in place.
Right. I think that's, I mean, I think we would need to do some research, obviously. And as Claude says, I think if you have a well laid out process where it's clear that we have the authority to do this, and you educate the community, you give people a chance to, get rid of the product, et cetera, then we would enact, a ban. So we can certainly head in that direction.
Council Mazza?
Thank you. I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Question comes on placing on.
I had a follow-up question, which was, I understood the part about informing people that sell this sort of insecticide not to do it. And I didn't catch the part about the city or the city contractors not using it. And I didn't know if I'd missed something or if that's an ongoing discussion.
Through you, Mr. Vice Mayor, to the city council members. So yes, this is part of the process. So it would include not only the retailers, but also working with the contractors. Obviously, we have to look into the parameters of what that means for the contractors doing business here in Cambridge. But just know that our process would not only look at the literature, but also look at the parameters for enacting a ban, if that's what the city council is asking.
I also just want to add that the contractors that are hired by the city do not use pesticides, so do not use this type of pesticide.
Thank you. That was my question. And the city doesn't either. So the city and the city hired contractors don't use this sort of pesticide.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Kelly. Thank you. Question comes on placing on file. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no, and the ayes have it. The next item to be pulled was number 18, which was pulled by Vice Mayor Dennis Benzin. Transmitting communication from Richard C. Rossi, City Manager, relative to awaiting report item number 15-63 regarding a report on the feasibility of requiring supermarkets and other food sellers and resellers to donate leftover food to donation centers in order to cut down on food waste. My question on this particular report had to do with the list of organizations that participate. I noticed that MIT and Lesley University and some of the other local college universities are not on this list, and also HMART. Just wondering if that's something that we could pursue.
Right. Thank you for the question. The list below is not an exhaustive list. These are entities that may be a part of the process. We acknowledge that there's already some progress being made around the city, working with Food for Free and some of our partners, especially with Harvard University. And so we can add to the list, but just know that this was a reference to a sample of some of the partners that we would be in city departments that we'd be working with.
Thank you. That's all. Councilman McGovern.
Thank you. One of the things in working on with the Income Insecurity Committee and looking at food insecurity, as well, what a lot of the food pantries and folks doing this work are telling me is that it's not so much a lack of food, that there are many supermarkets and organizations that give food. The problem is the infrastructure of a lot of these nonprofits doing this work. They don't have the prep space, they don't have the refrigeration, they don't have the storage, and so they can't fully take advantage, excuse me, they can't fully take advantage of the contributions that are out there. So I think, one of the things that you're going to see in the report when it comes out is a recommendation that we take a look at how we can help these organizations with that, whether it's even creating our own central location where we can store this food and the food pantries can then get it from there, or what have you, because it's not just, there are many supermarkets and organizations that will contribute the food, they can't put it anywhere. And so until we figure out some of the infrastructure problems, then we're not going to be able to fully take advantage of what the opportunities are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman McGovern. Council Mazza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering through you to the team, whether the issue of food storage, which was brought up by Mayor Marr last time, and I think brought up by Joan Square and a few others in public comment, was something we're looking at. As these vendors try to process their waste in keeping with state regulation and in keeping with the spirit of the policy order I put in, I think one of the main issues that we're all aware of is the lack of storage and distribution kind of hub infrastructure. We're wasting food through lack of infrastructure for dissemination. So what do we do as a city?
So I would think as this moves along, we need to understand what's the volume, how much are we talking about, how often, what kind of facility would we need, and is this something that we could figure out with existing stock of space, or is this something we'd have to lease, rent, build? So I mean, these are questions which will evolve if that's the direction we're going to head in.
And these are discussions
that will take place.
Okay, so you have a plan in mind. The discussions will take place on your schedule. It's not something that we have to drive.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. As you may be aware that the citywide plan for health improvement plan, one of the priorities has to do with healthy eating. And so just know that we've already engaged some partners from around the city. The timing of this in addressing food insecurity is spot on. It's a good question about the capacity for storage, but just know that in terms of our planning process, we're already looking at this. And the good news is that we already have strong commitments by some of our partners to address this. That said, the state has already set the precedent through the regulation that was promulgated last fall. So the timing of this could not be better for us.
Excellent. And if there were to be a committee meeting to further discussion, what would be ideal timing for you all?
Committee meeting. Oh, so our timeline now is at least to have the preliminary feedback to this body later this fall. So we already have in place a sketch of this process. We will be engaging more of our environmental staff to look at this issue. The question around storage, for example, that's something within our environmental health unit that we'd have to assess. But just know that by the fall, we'll at least have some more concrete feedback about what this would look like here in Cambridge.
Excellent. In planning my own schedule, I'll think mid-October or mid-November, whatever suits you all best. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman Hudson. Thank you. A question comes on place and on file. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. And the ayes have it. The next item to be pulled is number 19. Transmitted communication from Richard C. Rossi, City Manager, relative to a planning board recommendation to approve the incentive zoning petition. This item was approved by Council Calhoun.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. To the city manager and the deputy city manager and the acting assistant city manager for community development. Some simple questions. The council reviewed this, and I think it was in the ordinance committee, and there were a number of recommendations and thoughts discussed then. I don't know if all of those were included in the revised draft, and I can't remember it all. My question is, were those thoughts included, and what stands out as to what was not included? I don't mean it to be to throw you for a loop. We went through it in great detail. I think we all, in the end, supported it. Some of us wanted much more, but we got it. But there were other minor, in many cases, minor recommendations, but a few major ones.
Excuse me, Council Carlone, moving to pull committee report now as well, move for suspension of the rules.
Absolutely, thank you.
Council Carlone was suspension of rules to pull committee report number 5. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no, and the ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Chair. At this point, we don't have revised language that includes all of the elements that were discussed. This piece, it only includes the planning board's recommendations. So our intention is to pull together some revised language based on what was discussed at Ordinance Committee and bring that back to City Council ahead of the meeting of September 21st.
Okay.
And we would like to send that out ahead of time so there's time for folks to review and get comfortable with things.
My other comment is what I said at that meeting, that this is a great start, but it's maybe 20% of the need at a minimum, given that it's only half of what the impact of new construction is and the impact of existing construction and all the other issues, nevertheless, is not included in this. I just want to remind my fellow councilors of that. And I think we have to do more in other areas. And I think most people agree. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor Carlone. Council Mazin.
Thank you. I had similar questions to Councilor Carlone, actually, independently, and so thank you for answering those. I guess I'll just register what I usually say about this point, which is that, Boston's now considering a higher number than we're considering, and we're the most, I think, attractive real estate market in the region, bar none. And we should be the highest number, but also not for just arbitrary reasons, but because that's actually what the report mandates as the kind of necessary offset for the commercial impact to the need for affordable housing. This $24 is the number we need. So I'm for $24. I still can't believe sometimes that we're going to put the fear that we might lose commercial development someday ahead of the reality that we need higher linkage rates and more affordable housing now. And I'm actually, to James Williamson's point and a bunch of other people's points, I never thought of this point, that we're so attractive that we could actually do to lose some commercial interest in our space. Not only is that maybe true, but I actually don't think we'll lose an iota of commercial interest in development in this city. I guess I shouldn't be addressing you. You're very nice to sit and listen to me, but in addressing my colleagues, I think we should go to 2420. I think it's a no-brainer. I think that we're missing out on important affordable housing dollars and an important opportunity to put affordable housing ahead of commercial interests in this conversation.
Thank you, Council Mazin. Councilor McGovern.
Thank you. Well, I don't think it's a no-brainer. I think there's a lot of good brains that have supported the $12 a square foot. So I wouldn't quite go that far. And, I do want to say that, the recommendation, we've heard it a couple times. I've heard it a couple times of public comment. Some councilors have said it. The recommendation is $24. The recommendation was not $24. That was not what the recommendation was. In fact, the language, I won't read the whole thing, but it basically says, in recognition of the impact that adoption of the maximum determined contribution, that's the $24, could have on Cambridge's regional competitiveness, we recommend that Cambridge increase the current contribution to $10 to $12. So the recommendation is $10 to $12. That's a recommendation from an independent consultant. That's a recommendation from CDD. It's a recommendation that was supported by the Affordable Housing Trust. This is what they do. This is what they work for and what they fight for. If they felt that $24 was doable and was worth the risk, they would have supported that. I have full confidence in them. I know these people personally. I know how hard they work. And when all the experts who have given their time and their life to advocating for affordable housing say, wait a minute, we have to be bold and responsible here. We can't risk. It's easy for us to say, hey, let's gamble. Maybe we'll lose the business. Okay, but you're gambling with people's homes and lives, and I'm not willing to do that. And we have to. This is something we should be celebrating. It's very easy to sort of take an extreme position and say, this is what we should do, and if you don't do this, then you're not really, supportive. But that makes good highlights on a website, but it doesn't. You have to be more responsible than that. And the reality is that we're talking. We took the highest. It recommended $10 to $12. We took $12, and then we added an extra $1 plus inflation for the next 3 years, which will triple this figure in 3 years. And we will reassess it. And if we got to go up more, and we can go up more at that point, we will. We did talk about, people did ask about, could we do the Nexus study in 2 years and then have it ready by 3, because it'll take about a year. We did talk about that in committee, and a number of us actually were interested in doing that. But again, the recommendation that came back is 2 years is really not enough time to see whether or not to really judge the impact of this, and that they wanted to go 5 years and we're talking 3. So we even are going on the faster end than what was recommended. So I am proud to support this. I think this is long overdue. And I think this is going to generate millions of more dollars. And it is, like I said, it is a bold, responsible way to proceed that is not going to end up shooting ourselves in the foot and ending up with 0. Okay, or less than what we have. And so this is one avenue. Councilor Cullen has it right. This is one mechanism, right? If this were the only mechanism for affordable housing, then that's what the $24 suggests. But we have a number of other avenues for funding, and we've talked about those a number of times. So Councilor Cullen is right. This is one piece, but this is going to work. It's going to generate a lot more money, and then in 3 years, we're going to go back at it again. I think that probably the most important part of this, in some ways, the money is obviously, major, but the important part of this is that we're going to be doing these assessments automatically over the next 3 years. It's not going to take a council vote. It's not going to take a council initiative. We're not going to go back to the days of waiting 2 decades or 10 years before this gets reevaluated again. That is going to ultimately be something that's going to make a real difference, because it's forcing the city to deal with this and to move forward on this issue every 3 years. And that, I think, is going to make a huge difference in the long run. So I want to thank everyone for their work on this. I think it's a great victory. And I'm proud, and I want to thank Councilor Simmons for just incredible leadership on the Housing Committee, not just on this, but on a lot of other issues around housing. And I think we should be proud of this.
Councilor Mazen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm reminded by my colleague, Councilor McGovern, that I would be remiss if I did not thank Councilor Simmons for her hard work on this subject, leadership on this movement, and if I didn't thank my colleagues, because $10 to $12 plus $1 in CPI a year is important. I think if we hadn't done that, then we'd be remiss. I don't mean to undercut the work we've done or my colleagues by saying what follows, which is that I just don't agree that this is a gamble. I just want to underline that fact, that when you have a vendor weighing options between 2 different parcels, and they're thinking, we could go Boston, we could go Cambridge, we could go Belmont, who knows what they're building or what the calculus is. There are other factors that weigh much more heavily in this discussion than this set of dollars per square foot. There's the police detail, and there's wind, and there's contingency, and there's soil quality, and there's all these things that add up to hundreds of dollars per square foot. And this is the last thing that anyone thinks about. It's just another number under there. And when you weigh how it adds up, there are so many more factors, parcel to parcel and place to place, that affect the bottom line, that this one vanishes in the equation. And so the difference between $15 and $24 is simply, from my perspective, a talking point for commercial interests, and not really of material import to the actual calculus of building a building. of making a building. And so the only question is how much housing can we get out of this number? That's the only question for me.
Councilor Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I would echo Councilor McGovern's remarks and reiterate what Ms. DeRosa said, which is it's not so much how much money we can get from the builders per square foot, it's how much we can actually defend illegally. And like Ms. DeRosa and like the Vice Mayor, I'm an attorney, and I know that you just can't pick numbers that are not defensible and make them work. And I'm hearing people that are more expert in this sort of law than I am telling me this is what's going to pass a legal challenge. And I'm going to support their judgment, and I look forward to moving ahead with this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Kelly. Councilor Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly appreciate all the work that has gone into bringing us to this point. I feel like we've, in a lot of ways, reached the finish line almost, because we have not actually adopted the ordinance changes, but I feel very confident that we will. I do understand the discussion, the thoughts of folks that are saying, you know, let's go higher. I appreciate those sentiments. And I know that the City Council has been gotten a lion's share of information as to why we should go higher. And my response to that is I think the $12 plus the dollar amount per year has been vetted, agreed upon by the wisest course of action that the City Council's consultants, the community-based organization CEOC Act, the Nexus Study, the Affordable Housing Trust, the Housing Committee. I certainly appreciate the thanks from my colleagues, but it wasn't something I did by myself. And we discussed this quite thoroughly. And so I return the thanks by saying thanks for the commitment of everybody that had a hand and a thought in all of this. We had numerous hearings, hours of public testimony, community development worked overtime, all the time, every time, to get this to us so that we could vote on it and have this document before us. And I do certainly have to acknowledge the chair of the ordinance committee, because you brought this forward with a quickness, and I certainly appreciate that, because there have been a number of things on our agenda. I think the clerk is probably banking vacation time because she hasn't been able to take any time away with the calendar that we've kept. You know, I also take my role as City Council very seriously. And in order to do the job that I'm elected to do, it's important for me that I look at every matter in front of me, pull it apart, review it, and then review it again. And at the end of the day, come up with what I feel is what's in the best interest for the city. And I make that decision based on my knowledge, my experience, my best understanding of all the matters before me, and my best thinking, and not wishful thinking. So I don't think I can cherry pick pieces that I like. You really have to look at this very comprehensively. And I sort of take it in this regard. The $12 per square foot rate is what I think, as of 9 out of 10 dentists would say. You know, it's that kind of thing. That we have the information before us. I think it's pretty standard and very strong, and the professionals have certainly weighed in. So I am going to push that we vote on this as it is before us. I think if we push this any further, two things are going to happen. One, my colleague already said, that it may not stand up to legal challenge around Ms. Farouk. I've heard that several times when you said that. Or that it will slow or cool development in a very hot development area. So we do nothing or we go too high doesn't mean that the contiguous areas around us will not, and then we will not receive the benefit because we didn't take the appropriate action. So Mr. Chair, I would like to see that this is passed forward with to a second reading. I know there's a provision that there's still some language changes, but with that provision that will happen by the time it comes before us for a formal vote, but I do not want this, the language before the council. I would like to support this. I'd like this to go forward to a second reading, Mr. Chair. And if there's no further discussion, that would be my vote.
Just a very quick.
Council Simmons, I have Council Kelly, then I have Council Mazin.
I apparently misspoke. I promoted Ms. Rosa to an attorney, and she is not, for which I apologize.
She acts like.
Is being an attorney a promotion?
Absolutely. From my perspective, it's a promotion. But I do know that in conversations, I guess I misattributed them. In conversations, apparently, perhaps with city staff, it was the idea that this is the number that's legally justifiable. So perhaps if that could be clarified, if I could be straightened out on this one by someone at the table, I'd appreciate it.
Council Mazin. Sorry.
Through you, Mr. Chair, legally defensible in the sense that this is the recommendation of the Nexus study, which is the document that serves as the legal justification for the ordinance changes.
Mr. Vice Mayor, so if we go above that, my understanding is that we risk this being tossed. Am I off base in that understanding?
I thought if you went.
I think the key is to stay as true to the recommendations in the Nexus study as possible. I'm not an attorney either, but that is my understanding.
Mr. Chair.
Council Simmons.
If I may, as I understood it from talking to the consultant several times, it's not that we can't do it. What the consultant said very clearly, that we put ourselves in jeopardy for a legal challenge if we were to push it that high. So here it is. This is how much. It's $25 a square foot in order to underwrite the cost of a low-income unit. However, you would be tempting the hand of fate, that's the way I took it, to push it that high. And the recommended amount was the $12. That was, I think, said several times over. Of course you can do it, but it would not be wise. And I sort of liken it to when, back in the days when I was on the school committee, when we looked at changing one of our control mechanisms when it came to school choice. And we changed it not because we wanted to, because it was the right thing to do in order not to be sued, or this particular vote would withstand a legal challenge. So that's how I look at this. The Nexus study is what the mechanism through which we can make these choices. And by making the choices in the context of a $12 amount as opposed to $25, says that we would be less likely to be challenged on this, because if we were to be challenged, we would be held up in court for a number of years and lose thousands of dollars trying to defend what we believe is the right thing to do. So as opposed to put ourselves in that predicament or situation, it's best to follow the $12 amount that the City Council, the Housing Subcommittee voted to choose.
Thank you, Councilman. We have Council Kelly again, and then we, Council Carlon, you're all set. Council Carlon.
I may be in the queue somewhere, but I'm happy to go after Councilor Carlon.
Councilor Mazin, please. Were you early? Okay, I'll be brief. The recommendation, the report said, one, the impact of new commercial construction can be justified to be at $24 a square foot. So that's the impact. Politically, the decision was to do it less. Why I felt comfortable with that is instead of the 12 to 14, usually when you hear something like that, it ends up being 12. I'm sorry, 10 to 12. I want it higher. It usually is the lower number, and we added the $1 a year. And the reason I brought up the question to Aram is that I think it should be $1 a year until the Nexus study is updated, which means it probably would be 4 years. And in time, a year goes quickly, and in time, it will get up to where it should be. Here's the thing, if you look at the broad picture, it in essence will lower the price of land. Well, whether the price of land is $252 a square foot is indicated on Ames Street, or double that as needed on Volpe, that's a good thing. We can't afford land for affordable housing now. So if you look at the big picture, this is a negative for new developers to come in, but then they change their building program. So I actually think in the long run, this will expand dramatically as it should do, and it will have many positive implications. There's only so much land left in Cambridge to develop. That will raise the value of the land in itself and compensate for this piddling amount that we're discussing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Cologne. Councilor Mazin.
A couple things. One, just to put in context the difference between $15 per square foot, 12 to 15, 3 years, and $24.20 per square foot. The extra $7 per square foot, if you have an enormous project, 200 square feet or 2 million square feet, these projects cost a significant fraction of $1 billion to build. In some cases, billions. In the case of Volpe, it might be billions. When you talk about a 200,000 square foot project, you're talking about 1.4 million extra dollars attributable to the $7 we're talking about. That's completely reasonable within the scope of building. Like, this is a reasonable amount of money on the face of it. But dig deeper and you look at the report, and to my colleague, Councilor Kelly, I want to be clear about this. The reason reports like this exist is that linkage fees didn't always exist. One day, someone bright said, why don't we actually tie the impact of this commercial to the affordable housing and economic development we need? And then the people who this fee was being imposed upon objected in court. And the courts essentially said, as long as it can be justified with this type of economic study, it's fine. What this economic study told us is that up to 2420 is justified, defensible in court, and workable. They just said, but don't fly too close to the sun because you've got important commercial interests in town, basically. I get that, but that's not who we're here for, and that's not going to affect their ability or their interest in building in the city. It's just not. It's not a large enough number, and it's not a significant enough impact on their bottom line. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mazin. I just have a couple of comments, and that first just want to start by thanking the city staff. For me, as a freshman counselor, this is probably one of the most important actions that this council has taken, and we took this action during a time that the Department of Community Development was grieving the loss of its leader. And you guys stepped up and under a lot of pressure, you put this before this body. This has been vetted several times, and both in the Ordinance Committee and in the Housing Committee, has been discussed before the full City Council. I had a conversation today with the Mayor of Somerville. And, he and I have been talking a lot about these issues. And oftentimes we hear members of our community testify and compare what we're doing here to Somerville and compare what we're doing here to Boston. I can tell you that we are a leader. We're not just looking to raise this. We're now taking action to raise this to $12, which is a lot more than what we're getting now. But this is one of several pillars. Right? We have 3 pillars around affordable housing in our city. One is the CPA funds, inclusionary zoning, and now the linkage fee. And in my conversations with Mayor Curtatone, he said to me, Dennis, we're not going to be able to solve the affordable housing crisis with just linkage fees. We're not going to be able to solve it with inclusionary zoning. We're going to have to be bold and aggressive. And what I want to make sure our community understands is that we can't solve all these issues that we're facing in our city with just the linkage fees. And I think, attacking each other over linkage fees, whether it should be $12 or whether it should be $24, is really not, it's not helpful to anybody. I think we're doing more than a lot of cities across the state. We use more CPA funds than any other city in the state. We've created a number of inclusionary zoning units. In Boston, you see all the developments going up in the Seaport. There are no low-income people living in those units. There are no middle-income people living in those units because those developers opt out of the linkage of the inclusionary zoning program and pay a linkage fee to the city, which at this point is much less than what we're proposing here. So, we are looking at this issue aggressively, and I know that we're going to have to think about some additional tools to create more affordable housing, but I want to really commend all of my colleagues for really developing consensus and voting on something that won't choke development and won't show development in our city, good development, but will continue to allow our city to grow and at the same time benefit our residents. So I want to thank you for all the hard work that you've put into this. If there's no, Councilor Calhoun.
Just a minor correction, Vice Mayor. Nobody attacked anybody. We're talking about ideas and ways of solving it. And I think we all agree, which I feel good about, that we have to do even more. The crisis in affordable housing is at its peak in Cambridge compared to all the other towns around us. And that's what we were talking about. There was no personal attack. It was a discussion. And that's what we're supposed to do. Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. The question comes on referring.
Move to a second reading.
1 second. We have the
I'm so
two
excited,
parts.
I can't wait.
Two parts here. The question comes on referring agenda item number 19 to the petition. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no, and the ayes have it. On accepting committee report number 5 and placing on file and adopting the underlying order pending revised language from Department of Community Development and moving to a second reading. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no, and the ayes have it. Thank you.
Excellent.
I think everyone in here should clap.
Now we can clap, right?
I'll clap harder on ordination.
The next item on the manager's agenda is number 24, which was pulled by Councilor Calhoun. Transmitting communication, Council number 22, which was pulled by Councilor Toomey. Transmitting communication from Richard C. Rossi, City Manager, relative to awaiting report item number 15-68 regarding continued efforts to engage federal and state delegations regarding FAA and flight patterns. Councilor Toomey.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor, through to the city manager and staff. Certainly, this is an issue that's raised a lot of concerns among a lot of individuals. We're not going to shut down Logan International Airport. So, in our discussions with the state and federal officials, I would ask that engage them in how do we increase service at Hanscom Air Force Base, the airport in New Hampshire, the airport in Rhode Island, so those people who live near there do not have to commit to Logan to use that. So I'd really like to see us be very aggressive in engaging those state and federal officials who in the area that have airports, abutting in Massachusetts to take the pressure off of Logan International Airport. I think that would be very extremely helpful because the reality is that we're just not going to close the airport and how we change the flight plans. But if there's a way that we can increase levels of service at those airports to relieve pressure at Logan, I think we'll go a long way to help alleviate these noise issues. So I'd ask that you add that to the discussion with these officials. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Toomey. The question comes on placing City Manager agenda item number 21 on file. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no, and the ayes have it. I'm sorry, number 22. The next item on the agenda is number 24, which is pulled by Councilor Calhoun. Transmitting communication from Richard C. Rossi, City Manager, requesting approval of the discontinuance of an approximately 20-foot wide, 8,660 square foot parcel of city-owned land along the eastern edges of Ames Street between Broadway and Main Street. the Ames Street parcel in connection with the disposition of this parcel that the city council previously approved. Councilor Calhoun.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. This is a very friendly observation, and this is a good project. Ames Street was designed much too wide, and making housing work there makes all the sense in the world. It's a very creative thing, but just an observation, at $2 million, works out to $232 per square foot. And from my memory and similar projects in East Cambridge, this is sort of a blind calculation. I'm talking about the price of the land. So the observation is about price of land vis-a-vis this site and what Volpe needs to make it work. And if it's $232 a square foot, and we worked out the other day that Volpe is almost double that to make their project work, was this site, because it's an odd site and only one owner could really use it, did that lower the price? And I realize you don't have that background, but just in general. And my point is, if this is the going price per square foot, Volpe is really in difficult position. So it was more an observation, not requesting a full answer, but it's something to think about. Oh, the man is here.
He couldn't resist.
Wow.
Through Mr. Vice Mayor to the Council Calhoun, we had the land appraised. Because it's an odd shape, as you point out, it had limited value compared to a developable site.
Yeah, I get
so
that.
When adding it to the other piece, it would have more value. But it in itself, and that's why the value came out where it did, because it was a limited access, a limited point. It couldn't have been a developed site by itself.
I agree with that. So I guess the broad question, although the Vice Mayor may stop me, and I understand that I'm changing the subject a little bit, Volpe then, indeed, the land value would be significantly higher because of its size.
The Volpe site obviously would be a different calculation. It would be a higher valuation because it could be developed in and of itself, which this would not be.
It's pretty scary to think if this is the true value of land, which it's not because it's of its shape,
right.
The 232 value, $2 million value, then we can't transfer that number to Volpe because of 14 acres is obviously much more desirable.
Right.
Okay, thank you. So it was more an observation, not a comment on the project. It's a great project. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Mr. Vice Mayor?
Councilor Truman.
Just to follow up on the look of our street, there's a lot of change the way the queue is down there. What this solved in my observation, and as well as been caught behind cars that are actually parked because the cars are parked in the middle of the street. Would these cars not be going up against the curve? And it's very confusing because if you get out of that street, you have the cars that are parked sort of in the middle of the street in the bike lane, and then cars trying to go broad ways. So would this solve that land? Would this pattern be changing?
For you, Mr. Vice Mayor, the design will be changing a bit. One of the things we're looking at and really working closely with Boston Properties on is what's the best layout for the bike facility. So right now it's a protected bike lane on each side on the inside of the parking. One of the options that's being really looked at is having it be a two-way bike facility on one side, and that would be the east side of the street. So then it really lines up well with the 6th Street walkway. So those are some modifications that are being considered now, and then the parking on the other side would be up against the curb.
Thank you.
Striping. Yep, and the final striping and sort of orientation, I mean, I think there'll be some improvements in sort of learning curve from what you've seen out there currently. It'll be clear. Yeah, it'll be much clearer. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Councilor Toomey. Mr. Rayner, I have a really quick question for you. So we sell the land for $2-something million, and what do we expect we're going to generate in tax revenue on a yearly basis? I'm just curious. You may not have that figure, but
Mr. Vice Mayor, no, I don't have the figure off the top of my head, but it will be exponentially higher than the 2 million, based on that value, because it will be added to another piece of developed property. So it'll be bringing in a sizable amount of money over time.
Yeah. Thank you. On adopting the order, all those in favor say. Roll call. On adopting the order, all those, roll call.
Vice Mayor Benson.
Yes.
Council Calhoun.
Yes.
Council Chung. Council Kelly. Yes. Council Mazin. Council McGovern. Yes. Council Simmons.
Yes.
Council Toomey.
Yes.
Mayor Ma. And the order is adopted in the affirmative vote with 8 in favor. Council Mayor Ma. Order is adopted in the affirmative vote with 9 in favor.
Thank you. On to the calendar.
Number 1 and.
Mr. Vice Mayor?
Yes, number 1 and number 3 have been pulled by Council Kelly. Council Kelly?
Thank you. Charter rate item number 1 is about asking the city manager to give us information on what students we have who live in Cambridge but are going to charter schools. The city spends, this isn't school department budgets, city budget, about $10.5 million a year on charter schools, and we pay the tuition of the kids that go there. Some of the charter schools have really high class enrollment declines between 9th and 12th grade. The community charter school at Cambridge loses on average 59% of its students between 9th and 12th grade. Prospect Hill Academy loses roughly 22% of its students between 9th and 12th grade. Cambridge Rindge and Latin loses 10%, which is a number arguably one should worry about, but I would say that's something more in the school department's realm than ours. But because we are paying for the charter schools, I think it's up to us to figure out what they're doing with our students. So with information about who's going where, how long they're staying, when they're coming back and so forth, we can have a much better discussion about where charter schools fit in public education.
On the order, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no.
I'm in favor of it in general. Last time we had talked about the convening of some kind of meeting. Mid-vote here, so I'll just say yes. But we're losing a lot of the discussion we had last time, including additions that I wanted to make. I'm not sure what we want to do about that. Yes, thank you.
So on the order, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no, and the order is adopted. The next item that Councilor Kelly has requested to be taken off is number 3, which will require a vote to bring it forward. It's number 3. Congratulations to the Cambridge Synchronized Swans for qualifying for their Synchronized Swimming Junior Olympics, and best wishes for continued success. On bringing the item before us, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. And the item is before us. Councilor Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would move the adoption of the amended resolution.
And the clerk has the amended language.
So I'll have the amended text on your desk.
Okay, on the adoption as amended, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no, and the item is approved. We'll turn at this time to applications and petitions.
Mr. Chair,
Councilor Simmons.
I would move that we adopt 1 through 8.
No.
And I wrote notes to myself. 1 through 8, and then on 9, refer to the ordinance committee and planning board for report.
Mr. Mayor, can we bring number 6 before us? I have a motion to go to, sorry, am I in the wrong section here?
Yes. Applications and petitions.
I apologize. I'm in committee reports, I think.
Committee reports. So hang on one second now. Councilor Simmons has moved 1 through 8, and 9 is a refer to the ordinance committee for a planning board and hearing. And the clerk has informed me that on number 1, that is no longer in.
To be withdrawn. So then I would,
That item needs to be withdrawn because the event has been canceled.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. Then I
Okay,
would-
so on the adoption of 2 through 8 and 9 referring to the ordinance committee and the planning board for hearing and report, and just placing number 1 on file? No. I'll withdraw it. On the order,
Mr. Mayor, before we vote, I think it would do, I know we have a very long meeting, to take a few moments and talk about 9. It is a weighty issue, and allocating 3 or 4 minutes, 1 minute for a few counselors would be important, I feel.
okay, so let's pull that off on 1 through 8. Excuse me, 2 through 8. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no, and those are all approved. On number 9, it's a petition to receive from the Cambridge Redevelopment Authority to amend the Cambridge zoning ordinance and the Kendall Square Urban Renewal Plan to amend the current zoning for the MXD district in Kendall Square to reflect the proposed changes to the plan. The correct action would be to refer to the ordinance committee and the planning board for a hearing and report. Councilor Mazin.
Thank you. I'll be as brief as promised. There is a very weighty and lengthy petition. It's something that will, I'm sure, see its time in ordinance committee and will be important to have a thorough discussion there. I'm very much in support of almost everything the CRA has brought before us, and want to talk about the specifics. In particular, we see in the kind of preamble and summary on page 2 the discussion of innovation, and I just want to make sure that we're beginning to subsidize those who can't afford even that innovation space. I want to make sure that we talk about the actual thresholds related to middle income versus moderate or affordable income housing. Middle income is actually quite close to market income, and how can we push some of that down to moderate or even affordable, or keep both? We heard Mr. Jakewith talk about the importance of reaching towards a higher standard for affordable housing, potentially 20% affordable housing. Then we also heard about CRA revenues on page 4 being potentially quite substantial, and anything we can do to put more money in the CRA's pocket in order to improve this city, I'm all for. I'd love to hear even more about what those plans and programs are. Everything I've heard about your expenditures to date has been amazing. So that's me. Thank you.
Okay, on referring to the ordinance committee and the planning board for hearing and report, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no, and the item is referred to the ordinance committee and the planning board. At this time, we're going to turn to communications.
Mr. Chair.
Councilor Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move that we take 1 through 15 and then 17 through 20 in place on file. And number 16, refer to application and petition number 5.
On the motion by Councilor Simmons, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no, and the items are so approved. At this point, we're going to turn to resolutions.
Mr. Chair.
Councilor Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to move that we bring the policy order and resolution before us for discussion and subsequent adoption, and then I can let you know what I want to pull.
Okay, the motion by Councilor Simmons is to approve number 1 through 94.
Understanding that
Making them all-
5, 15, 18, and 24 have already been dispensed with. Are we on the policy and resolution list, or am I ahead of myself?
Resolutions.
Oh, I went too far.
So 1 through 94.
Yes.
And the motion is to adopt all of those and make them unanimous.
Making them unanimous upon adoption.
Vice Mayor Benson.
I'd like to pull number 28.
Okay. On the balance, all those in
balance.
favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no, and the items are all approved. I'm just going to take number 28 right now, which is congratulations on the preservation of affordable housing and its acquisition of Bristol Elms Apartment, and thanks for their commitment to affordable housing in Cambridge. Sponsored by Councilor Toomey, pulled by Vice Mayor Benson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to yield to the lead sponsor, and if I could just say a few words after Councilor Toomey.
He was content saying nothing.
I would just join with everyone and all the housing advocates and the city staff and the residents and the staff of Bristol Arms and the mayor's office for working to make this possible, to keep Bristol Arms a 100% building, affordable for a very long time in the city. And it's a way that the city is committed to continue those buildings that face expiring lease and be very successful with a lot of the buildings, Royal Drive and Rouge Towers that are going to go could have been expiring lease units, but everyone working together to preserve those affordable units. So I hope that's a commitment that we can continue for a very long time in the city. And I just want to thank everyone that, and if I missed anybody, I know who they are. So it's just thank. It was a great day. I couldn't make it because we were at the Stars overriding some of the governor's voters, which probably had something to do with some bills in there too. So it's a never-ending battle for affordable housing funds, but it was our spirit. Thank you.
I might just add, Mr. Vice Mayor, that Councilor Simmons and I were there. It was a very, very warm afternoon, but there was a great crowd there. And the housing advocates from POA, who are the new owners of the building and have made a great commitment to not only protecting those units going forward, but to revitalizing all of those units. And I will say that our own members of the Affordable Housing Trust, state leaders in affordable housing were there, and one after another talked about the large commitment from the city of Cambridge, and that what they have seen in the partnerships with our housing partners in Cambridge is something that is unmatched in other communities around the Commonwealth. And I will say that I think it was particularly a great day for a number of the residents who were there despite the heat, some of whom have lived in that housing development for 30 plus years.
Mr. Chair.
There were a couple of residents there that are close to their 90s,
right,
and have been there for many, many years. And I think that, it had such a good feeling to be able to have people there from the city, from our housing partners, from ACT, the Association of Cambridge Tenants, coming together to be able to celebrate the preservation of these units of housing. And I just want to touch on one little quick thing, and there's only probably a couple of folks in the room that will remember this, but that development was built by John Briston Sullivan, hence the name Briston Arms. And John Briston Sullivan was a distinguished member of the Cambridge School Committee, as was his daughter, Jane Sullivan. They built that as a kind of a give back and commitment to a city. They grew up very, very middle-class folks. They didn't have a lot of money, and he made a lot of money over time. But the commitment was to give those units back as affordable units, hopefully in perpetuity. And what we've seen now is a continuance of that well into the future. And I know that Elaine and so many people that have fought for affordable housing in this city have something to be proud of, because that was the protection of 100, I think there's 158 units there, and 130 some odd of those units were affordable. And actually, there was a further commitment of 11 additional units in the negotiation to turn 11 market rate units into affordable units. So that was in the size of those units are good family size units, and that's another thing to celebrate. Vice Mayor Benson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too want to just thank everyone that was a part of this effort. When we first heard of this was a huge challenge. We met the challenge, and we're a city that's committed to helping our residents, and this is just great. So I'm glad that we were able to meet the challenge. Thank you.
On the approval of making, Councilor McGowan.
Thank you, and I want to thank Councilor Simmons also. Back a number of months ago, Councilor Simmons, the Vice Mayor, and I put in an order about when we became aware of this housing was in jeopardy, and I think it's we talk a lot about different ways to add more affordable housing to the city, which obviously we need to discuss, but the preservation of what's already here, if we think that the situation is bad now, imagine if we lost this housing. Rouge Towers is coming up, and all the other places. So there are multiple fronts that we have to fight this battle on, and preservation of what already exists is a huge one. So it's a great victory for the people who live in those units, and I want to thank everybody for their work on it.
Just briefly, Mr. Mayor, you've said most of it, but it's just worth saying again. The work on the housing front has been tremendous, and everyone has really been engaged. And what was so wonderful about that particular hot afternoon was, like you said, the woman that you greeted when you came in. She said she was celebrating her birthday that day, and what a wonderful present. She was there with her son and daughter. But I met Salesman, who we know, former president of the NAACP, lived there since the 70s, and it was really extraordinary. This was an opportunity to see all the hard work we do around housing preservation, and certainly kudos to organizations like CEOC and ACT. But you see what your hard work really paying off, and folks were really very, very relieved. The relief, it was not just a celebration, it was just the relief to know that they'd be able to remain in their homes, and that was a wonderful opportunity just to see that and enjoy it and celebrate with them. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
On the approval, all those in favor say aye, and making that unanimous. All those in favor say aye, those opposed no. And the ayes have it, and that is made unanimous. At this point, we're going to turn to policy orders. Mr. Mayor.
On the policy orders, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Simmons.
Right. Move to bring the policy order and resolution list before the City Council for discussion and adoption.
Okay, on bringing number 1 through 25. And
with the exceptions of 5, 15, 18, and 24 that have already been disposed of.
On the, and actually, Councilor Chung has informed the chair that he has withdrawn number 6.
Number 6.
So on the balance of those items.
Mr. Chair?
Wait a minute.
You withdrew, sir?
Okay, but hold on. Councilor Calhoun.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I'd like to pull number 19, car sharing.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Toomey.
2 and 17. 6 was withdrawn.
Yeah.
No.
What was withdrawn?
Did you say 17? Wasn't withdrawn.
Number 6 was.
6.
Mr. Mayor?
Just hang on one quick second. 2. Councilor Kelly.
Mr. Mayor, looking for clarification, was
6 was withdrawn.
Withdrawn, that's what I asked. So, but you have my 2 and 17.
I have.
In 17.
Councilor Kelly.
3, 11, 12, and 21, please.
3.
11.
No, thank you.
21.
Mr. Chair, can I get 22, please?
22.
Mr. Mayor. Number 16.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Mayor.
13.
Hang on one second.
sorry.
13 is McGovern. Yep. Councilor Simmons.
7.
7.
7.
Yeah. We're going to have an amended one.
Okay.
Move the adoption of the balance.
Yep. On the remaining items, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no, and the remaining items are all approved. Why don't we just stick with this for a minute? The first item to be pulled is number 2, that the city manager is requested to consult with the appropriate city personnel to determine the effectiveness of the policy of ticketing and towing vehicles that obstruct street cleaning to determine whether modifying this policy to exclude towing vehicles would have a negative impact on the city's ability to maintain clean streets. This was brought forward by Councilor Simmons and pulled by Councilor Toomey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the council bringing this forward. I will be voting no against it and urge my colleagues not to have the city staff expend any time and energy to examine this. I think the policy has worked well for many, many years, and I think to tinker with it right now will cause a lot of confusion around the city. It's an extremely effective way to keeping our streets clean, and I think if we now just don't tow the cars on street cleaning days, I think it's going to just add to much more debris accumulating on the streets, and which leads to more loading, infestation, and everything else. So I think it's worked well for many, many years, and I really want to expend any staff time examining whether we could change the policy. So I would urge my colleagues to keep the policy as it is now, and let's address some of the important issues that face the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly appreciate Councilor Toomey's thoughts on this. But like any policy or practice, one should review it to make sure it's still effective. And I certainly agree with Councilor Toomey that we do want to keep our streets as clean as possible, particularly in our more dense communities. Councilor Toomey and I both live in a very densely populated area. That being said, the reason why I'm looking at this is the tow aspect is burdensome. The money from the tows do not go into our pockets, it goes to the tow company. You get a ticket. Now, first of all, clearly, I would like us to increase street sweeping to twice a month. So I'll be bringing that before you, and I hope everybody will say, yeah, that's a great idea. But that being said, you get a ticket, you get towed. The tow is a huge fee. Oftentimes it has to be paid in cash. They take your car to the east side, to East Overshoe. So you have to find your way to get it. Excuse me? East Overshoe. You have to find your way to get it. So there's the burden of taking the taxi to get it. And other cities and towns, you're not towed. I'm saying to look into it, maybe even pilot it. If the money were going into the city of Cambridge's pocket, where we would fund community schools or arts programs for children, I probably wouldn't tamper with it. But it's not going into our pocket. It's going to support a private entity, yes, for the better good in terms of having our streets clean. I'm just saying, let's look at it and see if there's a better way. If people, they get the warning, most people move their cars, just a few. And so, again, I think it's worth looking at. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair. Just a quick, there are a couple things that in looking at this that we can also consider, and I don't think it takes amendments, but I think we can just ask the managers, maybe what comes out of it is that the ticket price increases a little bit, right? That keeps people, a $25 ticket may not be an incentive to move your car, but maybe a $50 ticket would. But also, I wonder if just thinking off the car, I wonder if street clean started at 9 instead of 8, when a lot of people have already left to go to work. Just that hour difference might also get more cars off the road. So I wonder if that would make a difference as well.
Mr. Chair? I don't have an opposition to that. All I'm asking is, we've done this for years. The biggest piece of me is the burden of getting your car back, the cost that you pay for it, and that revenue doesn't come back to us. So if we increase the ticket price, it might be a very sobering thing. Your car's still there, but you have a $50 ticket, and that'll make you think about, wow, this is street cleaning, I have to move my car. Maybe so, but I think it's worth looking at. I mean, whatever my colleagues decide. But again, this is a policy, practice, and procedure that we have been following for a very long time. We should look at it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Mayor?
I'm just going to add my 2 cents that I don't support changing the existing. I feel that, first of all, that for the person who comes and parks in front of someone's house, if the curbs are dirty, people are looking forward to street cleaning. When you have someone else's car there and they have to go around it, you still have the dirt in front of your car, and then they drive off with their their ticket. So I think the system, although I feel for people who have their car towed, I think the system works pretty well the way it is myself, but that's just me. On the order, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No. The chair is in doubt.
I don't know how.
So we.
Those don't have it.
It is a roll call on 2.
Vice Mayor Benson.
Yes.
Councilor Calhoun.
No.
Councilor Chung. Councilor Kelly. Councilor Mazin. Councilor McGovern. Councilor Simmons.
Yes.
Councilor Toomey. Mayor Ma.
No.
And the order is adopted on the affirmative vote with 6 in favor and 3 recorded in the negative.
Okay. The next item to be pulled is number 3, that the city manager is requested to reach out to Eastern Coach, Peter Pan, in Brush Hill Tours to relay the concerns raised regarding tour buses operating on restricted streets and determine what action should be taken against these companies to determine how to enhance efforts to prevent tour buses from parking in multiple metered spaces in Harvard Square. You could tow them.
I'm sorry?
Councilor Simmons.
I've been told.
Councilor McGovern, Councilor Chung, and Councilor Toomey all brought this forward. And it was pulled by Councilor Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I submitted some proposed amendments with a number 6 specific questions for the manager to answer. One is Putnam Ave subject to a truck ban? 2, are tour buses considered trucks for the purposes of such a ban? 3, how many trucks have been cited for traveling on Putnam Ave if such traffic is banned? 4, if trucks are banned on Putnam Ave, is the ban properly marked? And the property there says proper T, it should be an L instead of a T. What is the impact of citing a truck for violating a truck ban in terms of licensing fees and so forth? And does the state of registration for driver's license or vehicle registration impact enforcement options? These are huge trucks coming from all over the place that are going down a street that's not made for huge vehicles. When the King Putnam Ave School opens, which may be as early as January, we're going to see a lot more pedestrian and cycling activity on the street. I don't know what the answer is, given trucks and big tour buses tickets may create more problems there on that narrow street than it solves. But I would like to have the answers to these 6 questions at least to figure out where the discussion should go. There was a woman killed, actually a Cambridge resident, tragically killed the other day in Boston by a tractor trailer. It just highlights how incompatible some forms of transit are with others. So I would appreciate your support on this amendment. Thanks.
Mr. Chair.
Councilor Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly support your amendment. 2 things. This order is not the first time we've asked this or raised this. We had a very long discussion. I want to say Sheila Headley, who lives on Putnam Avenue, came a couple of years ago because she was so concerned about the trucks coming down Putnam Avenue. And Ms. DuPont, I think, who was a crossing guard, testified to her concern about it. And you're right, Councilor Kelly. The school will be opening soon. It's going to house the upper school, but it will have a lower school as well. Small children trying to negotiate crossing a narrow street with trucks and buses going down. I think we certainly should have some very serious surveillance and some ticketing. So I certainly support the questions that you've asked. My only question to you, Councilor Kelly, is that you did remove the second, you changed the order. And I would, or maybe, never mind, I take it back. I see you add an order between the 2 orders. I thought you removed the order. So I certainly, I'm the sponsor of this order, but I certainly would support it as amended. I would defer to see if my colleagues are of the like mind, and if so, I would certainly move to have it adopted.
Mr. Mayor?
On the 5th point that I noted, it says licensing powers. I would get rid of the word powers that was in there as a drafting error.
So, Mr. Chair, I would move the adoption as amended.
Okay, on the adoption as amended, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no, and the item is approved as amended. The next item to be polled is number 7, that the city manager consult with the Community Development Department and other city personnel to determine what kind of incentives could be provided to landlords who choose to refrain from increasing rents on their tenants and to report back to the city council in a timely manner. Councilor Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we had talked earlier, that I think it was the Vice Mayor that said there's no one solution to trying to keep Cambridge affordable. It is the use of many different strategies that will keep Cambridge affordable. And it came to my knowledge that one, maybe two landlords that I know, have kept their rents well below market for a number of years. Their property is in good condition, it's paid for. They could easily charge higher fees, and they elect not to because they do want to make sure that Cambridge stays affordable, and this is their way of doing their part. Is there a way, do other cities and towns have a way of supporting these landlords that keep their rents low? And if so, we should exercise some way of acknowledging or rewarding it. Is there tax relief? What can we do to encourage other landlords to follow suit by keeping their rents low and in so doing increase the number of particularly moderate and middle income residents in our city because they are now able to afford, because we have landlords that are willing to keep their rents low. So I hope my colleagues will support this and allow the city manager to find out there's something that we can do to work with landlords that are willing to keep their rents low. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor McGovern.
Thank you. I want to thank Councilor Simmons for this because we actually, I forget when it was, but Councilor Toomey had put in a similar order more specific to tax breaks, and we actually discussed it in governance, and the information that came back from the city was regarding tax breaks, and was saying that's really not feasible for a whole host of reasons, but we should be exploring other things. It's not just about possible tax. There may be other ways that we can get creative about this. So I certainly would hope I appreciate this and hope that the city can look at really creative ways that we can encourage landlords to keep rents low. And again, it's just another tool in the toolbox, another weapon in the fight to keep the city affordable. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
I'm sorry, Councilor Mazin.
I also want to join the chorus of people commending Councilor Simmons for a great order. This is an important idea, and I want to note that in the background, I've just been trying to work with city officials to figure out the extent to which we could kind of do a progressive real estate tax, which is kind of similar to this, actually. It's asking what methods are available to us to extract more value when we can, but also to ask less from those who have less. In this case, adding incentives into the mix would be another thing that would have to be tied explicitly to some kind of monitoring of rents, or to some kind of, on the other hand, with what I'm trying to do with the actual personal income of a property owner. I just want to bring that to the attention of the group, because if that actually goes anywhere, if we're able to approach the state, or if we're able to do that solo, I think that could be an important tool that also furthers what Councilor Simmons is trying to do here.
On the order, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no, and the order is adopted.
Thank you.
That was 7. The next item to be polled is number 11, that the city manager confer with appropriate city staff and report back to the city council with plans to address existing striping deficiencies, and also to minimize confusing or missing street striping during ongoing construction projects. This was brought forward by Councilor Kelly and Councilor Chung, pulled by Councilor Kelly, who I believe has an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This was also supposed to be sponsored by Councilor McGovern, but I messed that one up. The amendment is to add at the end of the order to update striping after construction projects and to repair striping after winter's depredations. It's not all about construction projects that are ongoing where we have our striping problems, and we've got some really confusing traffic layouts as a result. Thank you.
On the order as amended, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no, and the order is adopted as amended. The next item to be pulled is number 12, that the city manager confer with relevant city staff to design, fund, and implement an ongoing noise management program in the current budget year. This was brought forward by Councilor Kelly and Councilor Chung. It was pulled by Councilor Kelly, who has an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This also was to have been co-sponsored by Councilor McGovern, but I messed that one up as well. This is somewhat like an order that we filed and passed in, I guess, April, having to do with a noise management plan. This is more specific to aircraft traffic. I think perhaps aircraft traffic is getting worse, noisier. Certainly I'm getting more complaints about it. I've measured in my backyard, in my bedroom, and in my kitchen the noise of these airplanes going over, and it's in the 75 decibel range, which we wouldn't allow if it were our neighbor's fan, for example. I don't think we have any power directly to do much about it, but it's hard to have discussions about helicopters or banner planes or Lufthansa or any of these other types of noise-producing aircraft if all we can say is they were noisy and they were noisy a lot. So the hope is to be very clear with the manager that what we're looking for is some really solid data points so that we can go to people at the FAA or people at Logan or people wherever and say, this is what you're doing here. And they may not change it, they may change it, but at least we could have a better discussion about what works. Thank you.
On the motion as amended, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no, and the item is approved as amended. The next item to be pulled is number 13. That the city manager confer with relevant city and school staff to determine the best locations to install 3 new bike corrals in the immediate vicinity of the entrances or exits to CRLS, and also to have the new bike corrals in place before the start of the school year. This is brought forward by Councilor Kelly, Councilor Chung. Was Councilor McGovern part of this?
Yeah, I'm about to be.
And it was pulled by Councilor McGovern.
Thank you. If it is okay with the sponsors, I've heard from parents over the years also about the elementary schools, that there aren't enough bike corrals there. We're really promoting with all of our work around safe streets and everything else. Really, there are far more kids that are bicycling to school. So I would just ask that we add, after the first ordered that the city manager be and hereby is requested to confer with relevant city and school staff to determine if additional bike corrals would be beneficial at the elementary and upper schools.
And the clerk has that amendment? Okay. First of all, on the amendment, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. On the order as amended, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. And the bike corrals will be everywhere. Number 16 is the next item, that the appropriate city departments in conjunction with other stakeholders such as the Salvation Army, Cambridge Overcoming Addiction, and other nonprofits conduct a survey of opiate related deaths and persons struggling with the epidemic that are frequenting our squares, particularly Central Square. This is brought forward by Vice Mayor Benzin and Councilor McGovern. It was pulled by Vice Mayor Benzin, and there is an amendment to this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 2 things. One is we have an amended order. I'd like to substitute this order with the amended order. Everyone should have a copy on their desk. And 2, if we could just add Council Simmons' name to the order as a co-sponsor.
Okay, on the order as amended, all those in favor say aye.
Mr. Mayor, we just want to make a couple of comments on the order before adopting it, if possible.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you know, Mr. Mayor, this the opioid drug abuse crisis is becoming bigger and bigger. Just today in the Boston Globe on the front page, there's an article about this particular issue, and it's impacting a lot of families in our city. It's impacting a lot of families in the region and in the state and across the country, and we need to really begin to address it. And this is an opportunity for our city, through your leadership, Mr. Mayor, to meet with all the stakeholders, including the Salvation Army, the Cambridge Health Alliance, Overcoming Addiction, which is one of the programs in our city that's really been working with this population, and also an opportunity to hear from perhaps the security personnel at the Cambridge Health Alliance that has communicated to me some of the challenges they face with the merger of the psych unit as well as the emergency services unit, and how difficult it's been to deal with this population is struggling with drug abuse. So this is the number one public health issue in Massachusetts. Last year, there were more opioid-related deaths than auto accidents and gun-related deaths. So this is clearly a major issue. It's impacting all of our squares, especially Central Square. I've seen a significant and dramatic increase in the number of people that are hanging out in the square that are dealing with drug abuse. So, we've got to address it head on, and we've got to determine whether or not we have the capacity to deal with this crisis. And if we don't, then we need to commit the resources to doing so. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Before I make a comment, I just really want to thank the Vice Mayor. He's been relentless on this issue this term, and it's in making sure that this is on the forefront of our thinking. So I really want to thank you for your leadership on that. In addition to doing this work, you all know I'm a social worker, and one of the things that I do is I do a lot of consulting with different juvenile courts in Massachusetts, and it's probably 90% easily of the families that I work with now, where you have seen their children removed from the home or some kind of abuse and neglect that's happened, has been as the result of addiction to heroin or opiates. And it's just horrible, and it's obviously the individuals who are struggling with the addiction, but it's their kids, it's their parents, it's their siblings. It just destroys families and lives, and it's just, I see it on the front lines all the time, and it's just devastating. And really, again, thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor, for making us really pay attention to this. And it's a very serious issue, and we really need to do everything that we can, because it's just a horrible circumstance for everybody involved. Thank you.
On the order, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no, and the order is adopted. The next item to be pulled is number 17, that the city manager confer with the acting assistant city manager for community development with a mind towards informing new property owners of the desire based on planning studies to expand Ahern Field, and for the planning staff to keep these desires in mind as a vision for the site is developed by the owners and report back to the city council. This was brought forward by Councilor Toomey and pulled by Councilor Toomey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This has been an issue that's been raised many years ago. This Cambridge study Joe Glass was very involved with this. It was his suggestion of expanding the field and pushing the focus and straight out towards the other way. So my understanding is some of that site is for sale now, and we're looking to see if there's an opportunity to work with the common owners. One of the owners they approached many times, thought of selling the land, and they always politely declined to do that. So we're just looking for the manager and his staff to see if we can have some communication with those owners of the land to see the feasibility of this to increase substantially the amount of space over here in the field to accommodate other venues there, a larger soccer field, maybe another baseball game and a girls softball game. So it's something that hopefully we can explore. As well, now the price of land has dramatically increased from when we first broached this, and the right now is about to still with the opportunity and to approach and see if there's some kind of maybe tax incentives or some kind of incentive we can approach to make this a reality. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
The order, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no, and the order is adopted. The next item to be pulled is number 19, that the City Council go on record refiling as of September 16th, the attached proposed amendment to the zoning ordinance amended Article 6.000 of the zoning ordinance to create a new section 6.24 car sharing provisions that will create a definition and general provisions for car sharing and allow limited use for parking spaces for car sharing as a means to provide mobility options for Cambridge residents, employees, and visitors. This was brought forward by Councilor Chung and pulled by Councilor Carlone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. I realize this is an opening draft for discussion, but I do want to remind all the councilors that there were public discussions at, I believe, an ordinance meeting, but perhaps it was the ordinance meeting where neighbors had concerns that could easily be incorporated into this text. And I encourage that we move this forward, but I did want to mention that. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Chung.
Just wanted to quickly say, I received a communication by the clerk from CAD we'd asked to make some amendments to this in response to what neighbors were saying, and CDD was continuing to work, but it didn't have the finalized language ready for tonight. So they suggested I refile, they will anticipate having finished their work by our next meeting.
Okay, on the order, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no, and the order is adopted. The next item to be pulled is number 21, that the city manager is requested to confer with relevant city staff about the feasibility of implementing a truck ban on Harvey Street. This was brought forward by Vice Mayor Benson and pulled by Councilor Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will yield to Councilor McGovern.
Sorry. Right, we're adding, I'd like to add Chestnut Street to take a look at as well, because I'm getting a lot of complaints from folks on Chestnut of trucks and buses going down there as well. And this does sort of lead to I brought in an order not too long ago about some of the streets off of the small side streets off of Western Ave. So I do think we do at some point have to think about a better way to sort of do this and to look at this, because there seems to be an issue that's across the city of trucks and buses that are going down really narrow, small residential streets. I've heard stories of cars getting sideswiped. Certainly I live, you know where I live on this end of Pleasant Street, and we have oil trucks that go down there, every 10 minutes as the cut through to Western Ave, and the whole house shakes, and then has issues around the foundation and everything else. So, I think we should, for now, let's just focus, we'll do this on these two streets, but I do think we need to at some point address this in a more comprehensive way and figure out where, what we should be petitioning the state for. This is a lot of streets that this impacts. Thanks.
As amended, all those in favor say aye, those opposed no, and the order is adopted as amended. The next is that the city manager is requested to confer with the appropriate city departments with an update for plans for the creation of the Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, and Mathematics Coordinating Office, including any financial pledges from the city to implement the STEAM Working Group recommendation. This was brought forward by Vice Mayor Benzin and Councilor Chung, and it was pulled by Councilor Mazin.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I very much thank my colleagues and in particular Vice Mayor Benzin for leadership on this issue. As many know, Vice Mayor Benzin and I, and with committee members like Dennis Carlone and Craig Kelly and others who have been out. In fact, I think the whole council's probably been out to one or another joint committee meeting. And with the school committee's help, we've really formed some kind of high pressure, high traction wave for equity in out-of-school time education, in STEAM and hands-on learning opportunities. And now having appropriated the money, I think it's extremely important that we find out how we intend to use it, when we intend to use it, and what some of the hiring practices and metrics will be around that. So I pulled this in order to be added to the order, I think with the permission of Vice Mayor Benzin and hopefully with Councilor Chung as well. And I hope to see this this order pass and this work come to fruition very shortly.
Vice Mayor Benzin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to start by giving a little background about why this issue is important to me. I grew up in a neighborhood with Bob Moses, who's a very one of the most important civil rights leaders in our country. And we heard some testimony today from a member of our community that talked about how important it would be for our city to name Area 4 after Bob and Janet Moses. And Bob not only has talked about for the last 50 years about the importance of voting, but he's also talked about how important it is for our young people to be prepared for the 21st century. And in order to have full access to all the opportunities that our country has to offer. And he has said that workforce training around STEAM, he talks a lot about the issue of math literacy, is the most important civil rights issue of the 21st century. And so when I came onto the council and we spearheaded this effort and led this effort along with Councilor Mazin and many of my other colleagues on the council, it was really because this is one of the most important issues facing our city right now, is how do we get more of our young people and others into the innovation economy in Kendall Square. And, I put this policy order in because from the beginning, I've maintained that we have to have the highest levels of transparency around the work that we do. And this body has been incredibly supportive of this work. And, when I see information that goes out to the public that misrepresents the work of this group and the support that we've gotten from the city, it raises some issues with me. And that issue is that, Councilor Mazin, you had publicly raised the issue that we had received a $1 million pledge for this work. I've been to every single meeting. I've chaired many of those meetings along with you. I've encouraged us to have all of the meetings in public, not behind closed doors. Every single meeting has been reported to the city clerk and has been provided to the public. And I think it does this work a disservice, given how important this work is for our community and given the work that others have done in our community to bring attention to this issue, to publicly state that they will have $1 million pledge. I think it misrepresents the work that we've been doing. I think it puts the city administration in a position where they really shouldn't be making pledges. Either the money's in the budget or it's not. And if there is $1 million pledge, I don't know where that pledge was made, because it certainly was not made at any public hearings. So my question is, where did this pledge come from?
Mr. Mayor? So you've said some very forceful things. Are you sure that's what you want to go with?
I'm curious to know why the Cambridge Chronicle reported that we have $1 million pledge for the STEAM effort when the only budget appropriation that we have for this effort is $150,000 and $50,000 from the school department. And so my issue with this is that I've encouraged us to have these meetings in public, and it does this work very little justice when we have information that is not reported to the rest of us on the council around an issue that I find to be one of the most important issues facing our city.
I think what we have here is probably a simple misunderstanding, but the place where that was pledged, you were there, and it was a public meeting. Prior to starting this work jointly, we were working on this separately. You had an economic development committee meeting. I had a neighborhood and long-term planning committee meeting. I put out a 4-page document with plot points after having probably hundreds of meetings with community stakeholders. And in response to the meeting I was chairing before we merged, the city manager said, I'd like to commit $1 million over 3 years in cooperation with the school department. And that's the work we achieved together. It wasn't $1 million now, it was $1 million over 3 years. That's the public meeting where it was stated. I think we're a good way along to achieving that number. We are still trying to reach out to the corporate community, and now is the summer where that is beginning to happen. And of course, the second and the third year of funding and of corporate fundraise will be instrumental in meeting that goal. Because as you said, that we're right on track for 600K in 3 years and not $1 million in 3 years. And how we get there is continuing to work together. So I'm not really sure where this is coming from.
Well, Mr. Mayor, if I may, through you to Council Mazin. So again, the spirit of the order is to get this information back for the city manager. The city manager is not here to respond to any questions. I have not seen this information, $1 million, in any of the reports that I've reviewed. In my conversations with the city manager, again, it's unfair to raise any conversations that I've had because he's not here to speak for himself. But the only pledge that we have, which is in the budget, has been appropriated in the 2016 fiscal budget, is $150,000 for a STEAM coordinating position for that individual to go out into the private sector and to help us leverage more funding for this effort. But again, I'm not aware of any $1 million pledge. And the spirit of this order is for us to get this information back, because if we're going to be reporting information about the work that we're doing within this body, then we've got to make sure that we report the work as accurate as possible.
I think that's important too, Mr. Mayor, through you to my colleague, Vice Mayor Benson. What I hear you saying is that it's important to get information back on how we're going to achieve the $1 million in 3 years. I also hear you saying, although maybe we can just tighten this up later when we go back to the record, that maybe you're not aware of the $1 million. I know you're doing a lot. I'm doing a lot. We're all doing a lot. These are meetings that you were there for. And these are numbers that we discussed a few times afterwards in meetings with the city manager and on phone calls with one another in order to get there one day. I don't think we've done anything wrong here in pointing out the need for clarity from the city manager. I don't think we've done anything wrong in setting a lofty goal that we've begun to meet with pretty rapid timeline. So I will respect very much your order and your opinion, but I will continue to hark back to the number in the meeting that I chaired and that I witnessed.
On the order,
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Kelly.
I will say something, I'll bring it up again when we talk about the committee report, but it's not all about the Kendall Square innovation economy. And the A in STEAM stands for arts, and oddly enough, it turns out I have an arts family, as does Councilor McGovern and perhaps other people in the room. Being able to talk in front of 300 people, being able to sing in front of 300 people, understanding how to build a stage for a complex musical, knowing what to do when the lights go out at the wrong time or the mics don't work. All those skills are things you learn in the performing arts, You learn different skills in the visual arts. I'm not a visual arts family, so I don't know exactly what they are, but it's that creativity, the ability to build something out of nothing, something that the Cambridge public school system does stunningly well in my experience. We can't lose sight of the importance of just general arts for everyone, for people that are going to go be accountants or police officers or really anyone. They don't have to all work in Kendall Square, because honestly, we can't all work there. Thank you.
Thank you. On the order, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no, and the order is adopted.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, and Councilor Mazin is noted as a sponsor. Councilor Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to request unanimous consent to speak on something that's already been voted, number 23 of the policy order and resolution list.
23?
23. Okay. Got a problem.
23 on the policy order.
It has to do with the renaming of Area 4.
Okay, go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I co-sponsored an earlier order, I believe, asking that we go forward with the renaming of Area 4. And this order asks for a process of voting for that at Area 4 Day. The only problem I have, and I have to figure out how to address that, is that as Ms. Gray had spoke earlier, a couple of council orders prior to this, we asked for the renaming of Area 4, and I think it's the understanding of people that already participated that they had voted through the school, Fletcher Maynard Academy, and through Area 4, I can't think of the stabilization committee, but that the name would be Area 4. So the problem herein lies is if there's a process and it's named something different, how does that make the folks that have already participated feel? And so it's a difficult place because it's now adopted. It says to go forward and it should be this voting process, but it may be more problematic if, say, they decided to call it the place that has no name. It kind of dishonors the process that happened before. And so I'm in a bit of a quandary because I want to call it the port, and I would hope that everybody else wants to call it port, and people that show up on Area 4 Family Day, Back to School Day, every 4 day voted to do that, but what if they didn't? So I think we have a quandary, and now we've adopted it. So I look to my colleagues in the maker of the motion to help us out of it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Councilor Simmons. So this is a follow-up to a previous order that was adopted by this body, and I can't, Madam Clerk, I don't know if you could help me with the date, but I believe it was sometime in the spring. And we requested that the city manager work with the Fletcher Maynard Academy and develop a process for a vote on renaming Area 4 that would take place on Area 4 Pride Day. So in looking at the timeline last week, I realized that we have just this meeting and no other meeting before September 12th, and which means that we would not be able to accomplish the goal of renaming Area 4 on September 12th. And as you know, this is an issue that's been before this body probably more than once. And it appears that there has been a process, but that process has not been clear to me. And today was the first time I actually heard that there might have been a process where the name port name was selected, but I had no idea, and that wasn't raised at the last city council meeting where we adopted the previous order. So what I'm asking, and I met with the manager and the staff who were not able to prepare a report for us with regard to the previous order in time for this meeting, was that we were going to ask the community and all of our community organizations, including the Community Arts Center, Margaret Fuller House, the Fletcher Maynard Academy, Area 4, Bishop Green, and others who have been very much interested in this process, that we were going to ask them to help us spread the word have members of the Area 4 community particularly submit not names for the renaming, and the hope is that those names, the majority of the names that we receive are going to be the port. That's the hope, and that we would open up a voting process that would probably last about a week, that could be done over the web, similar to what was done with the participatory budget. But it sounds like we need to figure out a process for this to happen, and I'm okay with that. The issue that I have is that we continue to kind of move this process further and further out, and we don't close this out, and we don't close this out in a manner where the majority of the people who are in the neighborhood are happy with the process. And I think that's the issue that I have, because I had no idea that, as Renee explained, that there was a process. But how does the renaming become binding on the city? And so this particular policy order asked the name not be official until the entire majority of the city council votes on the new name. So that's a new element to all this.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would say to my colleague that he and I need to chat and chew over this one a little bit, because I just have some concerns. It's been adopted, but it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be implemented on the day in question. I just think we need to talk about it a little bit more, and I meant to pull it, and my mind was on something else, and so I didn't. So while it's been adopted, the Vice Mayor and I will talk a little bit about it. I think we're in the same camp. We just need to figure out how to. Yes, I think we need to talk this out a little further, is what I'm trying to say.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, time is of the essence only because, Area 4 Pride Day is coming up September 12th. And, part of the problem, again, is that we keep prolonging a decision on this particular issue. And I don't want to, I want to take advantage of Area 4 Pride Day, primarily because there are a lot of people from Area 4 that go to that event, probably more than any other event we have in Area 4. And this is an opportunity for our young people and everybody else who lives in the neighborhood to take part in a very important vote. And if individuals like Renee are want to see it named the port, then some of us have to do some lobbying, right? We have to go around the community and get others to come out and vote for the port. So,
Mr. Chair, through you to the Vice Mayor, I understand and respectfully disagree. So I would say I will take the initiative to talk to my Vice Mayor about this. I understand, try to seize the opportunity. I really get that. I just want us to be careful that we don't, and trying to do the right thing and move a process forward, that we don't upset people that think that the process has already happened. Particularly, we call it the port, you and I and so many others. But what happens if it's changed and there are folks that are already believing that this is the name, and now they've participated in the process where people say, I want to call it the neighborhood that's by the beer that looks like a rock. It's I think it's more complicated than it may appear. So it may take a little bit more time than either one of us like, but I suspect if both of us sit down with a few people and try to talk this through, we can come up with something that's agreeable, that gets what we both want done, which is the neighborhood renamed.
Councilor Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to both councilors Benton and Simmons. There may also be other people who have named Area 4 Area 4. The USGS, MassGIS folks that use spatial data in whatever manner they use it and assign names to it. So I think we want to clarify how much ability we actually have to change a name without confusing things over which we have no control.
Okay. Now we're going to turn to committee reports. The first committee report is a communication received from Donna P. Lopez, City Clerk, transmitting a report from Councilor Craig Kelly, Chair of the Public Safety Committee for a public hearing held on June 30th, 2015, to discuss with the License Commission how it works, the permitting and shared economy. The question comes in accepting the report and placing on file.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually was amazed at how many people showed up for this meeting. I think all of you or almost all of you were there. Understanding.
You give such wonderful meetings. We could not tear ourselves up. We just had to be here.
I can understand that. You're all here now, too. Understanding what the new economy is going to be, we saw a little bit of it tonight with Uber, Lyft taxis, but it expands to Airbnb, it expands to all sorts of things that we can share now via the internet, via iPhones, via a whole bunch of other new technologies that we couldn't before. Understanding how that plays into our local government and our regulatory systems and so forth is something I think we're going to have to spend a lot of attention on in the next several years. It's not going to get any easier, but we need to learn how to talk about it. So thank you all for being at my meeting. I look forward to hosting you all again in the near future.
Okay, the question comes in accepting the report and placing on file. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no, and the committee report is accepted and placed on file. The communication received from Paula Crane, Deputy City Clerk, transmitting a report from Councilor E. Denise Simmons, Chair of the Housing Committee, for a public hearing held on July 9th, 2015, to discuss whether there are measures that the city and local housing agencies and advocates can take to assist the soon-to-be displaced tenants at 295 Harvard Street. Councilor Simmons?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was an very important, well-attended meeting. It spoke to the displacement of over 100 residents. In the context of that meeting, another situation that we will be talking about very soon also came before the Housing Committee, which will be meeting about that tomorrow. But I'm happy to say that's some very good news. But we still are grappling with the situation. So there are 4 underlying orders that are very important that moving Cambridge forward, looking at how we can be proactive around holding on to the few units of privately owned rental property before they're all taken away through measures such as this. So I'm hoping that my colleagues will not only approve the order and place it on file, but adopt the underlying orders, and so that the community development and the Office of the City Manager can start to work aggressively so that to the degree that we can be proactive in saving what rental housing that still exists in the private market. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. On accepting the report, placing on file, and adopting the 3 orders, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no, and the motion carries. The next is the communication received from Donna P. Lopez, City Clerk, transmitting a report from Councilor Dennis Carlone and Vice Mayor Dennis Benzin, co-chairs of the Ordinance Committee, for a joint public hearing with the Planning Board on June 29th, 2015, to discuss the petition by the Planning Board to amend Section 13.10 of the Cambridge zoning ordinance so as to change the development controls applicable in the planned unit development at Kendall Square PUD KS overlay zoning district. Vice Mayor Benzin.
Mr. Mayor, I move to accept the report and place on file.
And adopt the underlying order. The question comes in accepting the report, placing on file, and adopting the underlying order. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. And the report is accepted, placed on file, and the adoption of the order. The next is a communication received from Donna P. Lopez, City Clerk, transmitting a report from Councilor Dennis Carlone and Vice Mayor Dennis Benzin, co-chairs of the Ordinance Committee, for a public hearing held on June 17, 2015, to discuss a City Council petition to amend Article 6.000 of the zoning ordinance of the City of Cambridge to create a new section 6.24 car sharing provisions.
Mr. Mayor, as discussed earlier, there was a good discussion at this meeting, and some issues came up that will be incorporated into the final draft. So I please move that we accept this report and place it on file.
On the motion by Councilor Carlone, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no, and the committee report is accepted and placed on file. The next is a communication received from Donna P. Lopez, City Clerk, transmitting a report from Councilor Dennis Carlone. Who did that? Oh, 6, 5. We're going on to 6. A communication was received from Donna P. Lopez, City Clerk, transmitting a report from Councilor Dennis Calhoun and Vice Mayor Dennis Benzing, co-chairs of the Ordinance Committee, for a public hearing held on July 15th, 2015, to discuss proposed amendments to the municipal code by adding Chapter 2.126 entitled Open Data Ordinance. Councilor Calhoun.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Once again, there was a lot of discussion as we continued tonight, but I move that we accept the report, place it on file, and adopt the order.
Mr. Chair, I have a few changes I'd like to introduce by way of communications from city officials. Number 2, there are about 4 changes, as John Hawkinson said in his public comments, and as Code for Boston sent in letters, and other people sent in letters, 2 of them somewhat uncontroversial. The other 2, in my mind, also more or less uncontroversial. The city retains the power to regulate its open data procedures quite closely. And so explicitly in section F at the very end, basically saying that they can claw back data, or in an earlier part, essentially making certain parts of data explicitly mentioned in the ordinance is too much. I think if the city ever wants to limit its own, the type of data that it actually wants to disseminate, then it's welcome to do that as part of regulations that it operates and it manifests, and I think they will do so as part of the Open Data Review Board. But the presence of such restrictive language in ordinance doesn't seem to be in keeping with what other cities do, and doesn't seem to be in keeping with where Cambridge will go with open data in the future. So we have to leave that option open.
So would you like to ask for suspension to bring in number 2 from communications and reports from other city officers?
Yes,
at
sir.
this time? So on the suspension, all those in favor say aye, those opposed no. And the rules are suspended. On referring number 2 to committee report number 6, all those in favor say aye, those opposed no, and those are referred to the committee report. And Councilor Chung?
I was just going to say that I was going to refer these to the committee report. I think these are, as we discussed during the meeting, these are all areas where I think the city is moving towards this, but the ordinance that we have now is something that the city solicitor, the IT department, the staff feel very comfortable with and already started implementing. And I think while as we discussed in the committee meeting, all agree that these are places we want to go, and I think we should refer them to the committee report and ask that the city manager through our IT department continue to look at these. I don't think that these are ready to be amended, that we're ready to amend the petition tonight. I think that's a little bit of a sloppy way to do ordinance, especially given that we had such extensive meetings with a lot of public participation, the staff all there to comment in real time.
Yes. I think hearing the comments we had last time, actually amending it in this way is probably one of the only ways to do it. Those comments were apropos. They'd come on the heels of many months, I think, of negotiations around the ordinance itself, where we landed, I think, almost pretty much where the city wanted it. These are the minimum. Of course, Code for Boston and many of the advocates for this type of thing want a lot more than this, but these are the minimum, these are the basics, these are the easy things. And these are the things also, when you look at Amendment 2 and Amendment 4, that don't actually restrict the city much or at all. These are latitude, this is latitude that the city already has in regulation with 2. With 4 is an interesting one. You don't want that in your open data ordinance. You don't want an ordinance that says to all these programmers and all these people who are going to make our data come alive, the same way that the MBTA transit and timing apps came alive for free. Just because the MBTA put out that data, you don't want to say to those people with this type of clause in Amendment 4, we're going to release the data, put in all this hard work to bring us free apps and free updates and all this stuff as a community, but we might take the data back at any moment. the purpose of an open data portal is to make concrete decisions about what data we'd like to release and then to kind of keep it out there. 4 is the only one that really limits the city, and it only limits the city per the standards that every other city already subscribes to. This is a basic one. 4 is basic. The other ones are pretty easy. Amendment 1 is moving up the statement of purpose from a lower down area to the first statement in a way that the city, I don't think, has any objections to at all. That one's easy. 3 increases the number of members in such a way that Councilor Simmons and the group seem to be interested in last time. And 2 actually doesn't limit the city at all. It actually removes limitations from the city. It says you're able to use narrative text, graphics, or anything else, but if you want to limit that, you're welcome to do that through regulation, and that's something that the city is able to do, and that's something that open data review boards and cities do in most other cities. They don't say in the ordinance, here's what we're going to limit, and here's the types we're not going to put out there. You say that through regulation to allow a city the maximum latitude. And this is not only the suggestion of Code for Boston, this is the suggestion of the Sunlight Foundation, OpenGov Foundation, whom we met with the executive director in DC when we were there for National League of Cities. This is pretty much a standard and low-key set of amendment suggestions. And if everyone would be more comfortable suspending rules to bring it before the council when the city can be before us, before ordaining it, that may be the best and most fair way to discuss it. But that doesn't mean that we should shelve these things and not amend the ordinance itself.
I don't think we're shelving.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair. I don't think we're shelving anything. I think that the city administration and city manager have already talk about these. They've agreed to to work with us on incorporating these into language going forward. And I understand everything you just said. I agree with, I think, on where with Sunlight Foundation, with Code for Boston, and where we want to try and go. I think it's the means that are a bit radical. I think that, you know, the sound is off. People at home can't even hear us. We don't have the city staff in front of us to talk about these amendments. And while you and I I've been working on this, and you know, we've been talking about with them about this. And while we may understand the changes that you're proposing, I think our colleagues haven't had the opportunity through the ordinance meeting to go back and forth with city staff and really understand it. City staff has some legal questions that they want to make sure are typed before they introduce some of those things. I don't think there's an unwillingness at all. I think we are getting there. I think that trying to just cram things in at 10:55 at night when the sound is off is just a bit reckless and radical. And I think we can send these. I would make an amendment that we forward this on to the city manager and ask him to report back on changes to the ordinance. But I think we should ordain what it is that we have spent so long talking about and have gotten agreement from the city staff on passing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say I certainly respect and thank Councilman Mazin for his thoughts on this. My hesitation would be because it's a late order to amend something that has already been properly vetted. And so my concern is that we don't have the benefit of talking it through and vetting it a little bit more. And you and Councilor Chung are heads and shoulders ahead of me on this issue. And for me, I would need a little bit more time just to talk it through and work it through. So I'd be reluctant, not disinterested, just reluctant to add on something that to be ordained that I didn't fully
I'm going to suggest, if folks will listen to me for a quick second, that we accept the report, place on file, adopting the order and passing to a second reading, along with the communication from other city offices that was referred to number 6. So it goes along with it. It's all there. If it's going to be formally amended, it will be amended before ordination. So on that, they're all very cooperative at 11:55 or whatever it is, 10:55.
So we don't start with nothing next time we talk about this. I'm not sure what of these amendments I disagree with. They all seem to make sense to me, and they seem workable. So that's where I'm starting at when we look at this.
And I might suggest that I think at the next meeting, or when this is going to be ordained, we would have city staff here that we could inquire about our concerns to them. Okay, on the order to accept the report, place on file, adopting the order and passing to a second reading, and this comes with the number 2 under communications from other city offices referred to it. On the order, all those in favor say aye, those opposed no, and the motion carries. The next item is a communication received from Paula Crane, Deputy City Clerk, transmitting a report from Councilor Nadeem Mazin, Chair of the Neighborhood and Long-Term Public Facilities Arts and Celebration Committee, for a public meeting held on July 15th, 2015, to discuss how emergent out-of-school time programs recruit underserved youth in innovative ways, how programs engage youth in advanced research and professional skill building, and how these programs may present exciting models for other organizations seeking to impact socioeconomic and educational equity in Cambridge. Councilor Mazin.
I'll just say very briefly, it was a fascinating and instructive meeting. I wish that we could adopt aspects of these programs to every out-of-school time program, the way that inner-city weightlifting is meeting with people, the way that BioBuilder is instructing people, and the way that people are doing passion-based hands-on learning in this city is absolutely amazing. And if we can just share those best practices, and if we can just increase the equity in the conversation and the breadth of our research, then we'll definitely be in great shape in the years to come. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Kelly.
I have an amendment to the report. I was at that meeting and I said something along the lines of what I said earlier tonight, which is, I think we're thinking too much about STEAM without the arts part of arts in terms of visual and performing arts. Not everyone's going to work in Kendall Square. Being able to create something out of nothing will serve anyone in good stead down the line, no matter what they do for a living. So I would like to be noted in the report as saying, Councilor Kelly said we need to put more emphasis on visual and performing arts.
Okay, on the accepting the report and placing on file, do you, for the clerk,
I need to know what page you're
You can pick the page. Okay, hang on a moment, I will pick a page. Mr. Mayor, let's put it on page 11 after the first full paragraph where it says Councilor Collin asked Ms. Richards, et cetera, et cetera. I stated that these discussions should include more emphasis on visual and performing arts.
on accepting the report, placing on file as amended, all those in favor say aye, those opposed no. And the item is accepted and placed on file as amended. The next is a communication received from Donna P. Lopez, City Clerk, transmitting a report from Councilor Craig Kelly, Chair of the Public Safety Committee, for a public hearing held on July 1st, 2015 to discuss policing and public safety, community policing, and police training. Councilor Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that policing in America is changing. I think it's going to continue to change, both in terms of issues like Black Lives Matter, but also ISIS in America, and a whole host of other things that we ask the police to address in their jobs. I think that we should talk this stuff to death. No, it's a bad choice of words. I apologize. We should talk about policing extensively to make sure that we're all thinking the same thing when they talk rescue vehicle, for example, to bring up sort of a sore point on how we can talk past each other on these issues. So I encourage you to read this if you haven't, and I look forward to hosting you all again at one of those meetings in the future. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Councilor Mazin.
I just want to say briefly, I'm sure it's not exactly what Councilor Kelly meant, but we don't want to inflame misunderstanding. There is not a credible threat to ISIS in America today, and so we should probably talk about economic equity and other types of violence in our neighborhoods before we talk about that type of thing.
Mr. Mayor, we can call ISIS in America whatever we want. Maybe it's not ISIS in America, but not that long ago, 2 people were stopped in Texas, which a lot of this stuff seems to happen in Texas, headed to a cartoon convention where there were cartoons of Muhammad being displayed, and they were armed with semi-automatic weapons and wearing body armor. So, I mean, I don't want to pick on any particular thing. I just want to point out that policing in America is not what it was for a variety of reasons. It could be white extremists. It's not ISIS in America was what I pulled out of my head. Could have pulled out a whole bunch of other things equally well to illustrate that this is not 1983 anymore. It's a very different world, and we're asking police to do very different things, and we need to constantly be talking to them. We need to be talking with other groups like the ACLU. We need to be talking to various communities that are policed. We all need to be talking a lot about these things so that we don't find ourselves in situations where a lack of previous dialogue keeps us from being able to effectively address current problems. Thanks.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Didn't mean to be snippy at all, just trying to
Let it go.
Kind of stand up for the media scrutiny and the sense of the conversation that hovers around the Arab and Muslim community here, just to make sure that we were as nuanced as necessary. And it sounds like Councilor Kelly is right there. Thank you.
Okay, the question comes in accepting the report and placing on file. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. And the item is accepted and placed on file. We're going to move to communication reports from city officers. There's one communication received from Vice Mayor Dennis Benzin requesting the approval of the City Council to attend the World Class Cities Tour, Mazer Foundation in the Netherlands from September 27th to October 3rd. The question comes in approving the request. Although, I think we need to have a roll call. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Kelly.
I would just caution Councilor Benzin. I think that he will do this regardless, but Amsterdam is not Cambridge. They don't have the same weather patterns. They don't have the same regulatory programs. They don't have a lot of things that we have, and it's important that when we look to other places, whether it be the Netherlands or Davis, California, or New York City, or even Boston, that we pull the things that are relevant from their programs and make sure that we understand what isn't relevant. I hope you have a great trip. I look forward to getting a postcard and learning more about it.
Mr. Mayor.
Roll call.
Mr. Mayor, just very quickly before the roll call, just through you to Councilor Kelly. Thank you. And I definitely been thinking about everything that you said. So hopefully we'll learn some new things. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Roll call.
Vice Mayor Benson.
Present.
Council Calhoun.
Yes.
Council Chung.
He's in Amsterdam.
Councilor Kelly. Councilor Mazin.
Yes.
Councilor McGovern. Councilor Simmons.
Yes.
Councilor Toomey. Councilor Toomey.
There you come.
Councilor Toomey.
All right. Councilor Chung. And the order is adopted on the affirmative vote with 8 in favor and 1 recorded as present.
Okay, Councilor Simmons, no, we're actually gonna have late resolutions first.
Oh, Okay, Mr. Mayor. I think Councilman McGovern leads the race tonight. All right, we have late resolutions. Condolences to the family of Dr. Anita Kerman submitted by Councilor Toomey. Wishing Star Phillips a quick and complete recovery submitted by Councilor Simmons. Resolution on the death of Mary Frances Seeley submitted by Councilor Simmons. Okay, congratulations to the Cambridge U18 baseball hitmen for winning the Middlesex Senior Babe Ruth Tournament submitted by Councilor McGovern. Congratulations to the U16 baseball hitmen for winning the Lou Thompson A Division Championship submitted by Councilor McGovern. Congratulations to the West Cambridge U12 Little Baseball League for winning the Bay State Tournament for the Champions Gold Trophy submitted by Councilor McGovern. Congratulations to Philip Gaines for being part of the Boston Astros base U18 travel team and winning the U.S. Baseball Championship Triple Crown submitted by Councilor McGovern. Congratulations to Eric Tajida Ramirez for being part of the Boston Astros base U18 travel team and winning the U.S. Baseball Championship Triple Crown submitted by Councilor McGovern. And then congratulations on the 23rd birthday to Damon Ely submitted by Councilor McGovern. The end, Mr. Mayor. That's it.
On the resolutions,
I know, these are the resolutions.
Mr. Chair,
on the approval of the resolutions and making them all unanimous,
I forgot a late resolution.
you have one?
Yes, it's very brief. Just happy 60th birthday to a special person, period. There you go.
The clerk has that. On the resolutions, all those in favor say aye, those opposed no, and those are approved and made unanimous.
Thank you. All right,
Is there a suspension for late policy orders?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
There's Vice Mayor Benson has moved suspension on suspension. All those in favor?
roll call.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I've said it before, I'll say it again, this is the wrong way to do business. There's nothing here that is timely, that can't be worried about in a month. People don't have the opportunity to look at it online. They may or may not feel strongly about some of this stuff. I think it's a really bad habit. I don't think we should do it. It's a roll call vote, but this is not how democracy is supposed to work.
I agree with Councilor Kelly.
Okay. On roll call. On
suspension to introduce late orders, Vice Mayor Benson.
Yes.
Council Calhoun.
Yes.
Council Chung. Council Kelly. Council Mazin. Council McGovern. Council Simmons.
No.
Council Toomey.
Yes.
BMR.
No.
And suspension fails with 5 for and 4 against. Late orders will be filed next.
Look at the time. There's nothing here. Is there anything that was?
Okay, you're gonna have a motion to adjourn your meeting?
Sure, everybody, but just in case.
Huh?
On the motion, I vote.
Oh, you're gonna have a motion? Yeah.
It needs 6. Needed 6 votes.
Oh, okay.
Good that you're here. It spared us from
On the motion to adjourn by Councilor Simmons, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no, and the meeting is adjourned. So.
Council Simmons.
No, I got that.
Oh, Council Simmons.
No, public comment.
Council Simmons.
No.
7:43.
Closed it.
Council's on her motion at 7:43.
Oh. I wanted the time.
Oh, sorry, I'm saying 7:43.
Well.
All right, people, have a great night.
Yeah. This is lot better than what I thought it was gonna be.